Chapter 160. If Ing Zong won, everything would be fine. But if he lost, wouldn't he be doomed as well? The stakes were too high. Human lives were at stake. Seeing Chao Jixiang nod his head in agreement, Yang Chendong asked, "Eunuch Chao, you are very familiar with the situation in the capital and the imperial court. Do you have any good ideas?" You really don't have any? As the saying goes, two tigers cannot live on one mountain. If the two tigers fight, one of them will be injured. Chao Jixiang gave an example, saying that they needed a war to solve the problem. After hearing Chao Jixiang's suggestion, Yang Chendong shook his head. "Eunuch Chao, since you have been in the capital for a long time and hold the power of the Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard, you should know that Walla's army is approaching the capital. If there is an internal conflict in the imperial court at this time, it will only hurt those close to you and make your enemies happy. Then what should we do?" Thinking about the military intelligence he had just received, Walla's army had already broken through Baiyang Pass and Zijing Pass, and was currently attacking Juyong Pass. The gates to the capital were about to open, and if that was the case, the capital would be in danger. It was indeed not a good time to have internal strife. But in this situation, without confirming who the emperor was, how could they divide their forces to fight against Walla's army? Just as Chao Jixiang's face was filled with worry, Yang Si rushed in from outside. The moment he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground and respectfully said to Yang Chendong, "Young master, Eunuch Jining is here. He is waiting for you 5 li outside the Yang residence." So fast. How please? After hearing this, Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. It was clear that he had expected this. But after saying please, he did not forget to add to Yang Si, "Old rules, he can only bring 2 people to the residence. Sigh, this uncle only wants to live the life of an ordinary person. I don't want to see an army coming. I will be afraid." Yang Si nodded and then walked out of the room. When Chao Jixiang saw this, his heart was filled with disdain. "You have such powerful retainers, are you afraid that others will send an army to attack you? What a joke." Of course, these were just thoughts in his heart. After knowing that Jin Ing was coming, there were some things that needed to be said in advance. Originally, Chao Jixiang wanted to wait for the right time, but now he didn't dare to hide anything. "Uncle Zhongdan, Jin Ing has already pledged her loyalty to Dai Zong. You have saved Ing Zong, and you have done a great service. I believe that once Ing Zong ascends to the position, you will not be lacking in benefits. You have to think twice about your every move. Reconsider? Well, I've been thinking about it. Let me think about it." Yang Chendong kept nodding, as if he had heard Chao Jixiang's words. However, from that moment on, he actually stopped talking. Instead, he closed his eyes, giving off the feeling that he was thinking about something. However, he was actually waiting for Jin Ying's arrival. Only when she was here could the next step be carried out as he wished. Seeing that Yang Chendong was indeed reconsidering, Chao Jixiang suddenly became anxious. "Uncle Zhongdan, no matter what, Ing Zong has been in power for more than 10 years. He is still very popular in the imperial court. Compared to Dai Zong, who has just ascended to the position, he has too many advantages. He should be the one to take charge." That's right. Eunuch Chao is right. Let me think about it carefully." Yang Chendong still didn't open his eyes. He kept nodding, giving off the feeling that he was really thinking hard. 5 miles away from the Yang Manor, Yang Si and Tang Tong rushed back. When it was said that Jin Ing was allowed to enter the manor, but she could only bring 2 guards, Eunuch Jin didn't even show a trace of displeasure. Instead, he happily nodded and agreed. Then, he smiled and rode his horse to Yang Si's side. From this, it could be seen that Jin Ing and Chao Jixiang were both astute people. Oftentimes, the more polite a person appeared on the surface, the harder it was to deal with them. Not long after, Jin Ing appeared at the Yang Manor. When she entered the side hall, she saw Yang Chendong resting with his eyes closed. Chao Jixiang had an anxious expression on his face. Listening to the voice and looking at people's faces, Jin Ying's heart calmed down just from this discovery. If Yang Chendong had already made a decision, Chao Jixiang wouldn't be so anxious. Since that was the case, it meant that he still had a chance. It had to be said that Jin Ing had indeed served 4 emperors. Now it should be 5 emperors. Few people could compare to her decisiveness in doing things. Seeing that the situation was still uncertain, she reached into her clothes and took out an imperial edict with a golden dragon on it. At the same time, she shouted, "The imperial edict has arrived. Uncle Zhongdan, please accept it." "I, Yang Chendong, accept the imperial edict." When he heard that it was an imperial edict, an undetectable joy flashed across Yang Chendong's eyes. He knew that Dai Zong was going to give him some benefits. He just didn't know what kind of conditions Dai Zong would give him. Yang Chendong knelt on the ground. Jin Ing read aloud, "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees that Count Zhongdan Yang Chendong is young and promising. He is proficient in both martial arts and literature. He protected the retired emperor on the dangerous battlefield. His loyalty to the great Ming dynasty is witnessed by the heavens and earth. He is hereby conferred the title of Duke Zhongdan and the position of commander of the Brocade Guards." Emperor Zong of the Ming dynasty proclaims this. After Jin Ing finished reading the imperial edict, she smiled and said to Yang Chendong, who was kneeling on the ground, "Marquis, please rise." The count had become the Marquis. Yang Chendong's lips curled into a faint smile. "Thank you, Eunuch Jin. You've worked hard. You're too kind. Compared to Marquis bravely saving the retired emperor, what I did pales in comparison." Jin Ying's eyes narrowed into slits. This was the second time he had mentioned the title of retired emperor. As soon as he finished speaking, Chao Jixiang shouted in protest, "Eunuch Jin, what are you doing? How did Emperor Ingzong become retired emperor? How come I didn't know about this? How dare you? This is an imperial edict from Emperor Daizong. Did he need to discuss it with you first?" Jin Ing was not so amiable when facing Chao Jixiang. Whether it was in terms of seniority or power, the two of them were not on the same page. In the face of Jin Ying's rebuke, Chao Jixiang had no intention of backing down. In truth, from the moment he had led his warriors and the embroidered uniform guard out of the capital, he had already decided on his stance. Since he had already made his choice, why would he be afraid of Jin Ying's angry rebuke? Chao Jixiang sneered. When Emperor Daizong took the throne, it was because Shi Heng reported that Emperor Ingzong was no longer around. But now that Emperor Ingzong is fine and will soon return to the capital, Emperor Daizong should take the initiative to abdicate. After all, his regent power was bestowed upon him by Emperor Ingzong. Oh? Emperor Ingzong is returning to the capital? Jin Ing blinked several times at this news. She ignored Chao Jixiang and turned to Yang Chendong, who was receiving an imperial edict, and asked, "Marquis, is this true?" "It's true." Yang Chendong had accepted benefits from Emperor Daizong, so he naturally had to express his gratitude. He immediately said, "Eunuch Chao is correct. Emperor Ingzong is heading to the capital with Minister of War Kuang Yi, Minister of Revenue Wang Zue, and other officials." Marquis was ordered by Emperor Ingzong to return to the capital first so that he could report to everyone that he was safe. But he didn't expect Emperor Daizong to have already ascended the throne. In this case, once Emperor Ingzong returns to the capital, won't there be a country with 2 emperors? What should we do then? Yang Chendong directly laid out the problem in front of Jin Ing and Chao Jixiang. His gaze continued to wander between the two of them. A country with 2 emperors. Whenever such a thing appeared in history, it would always be accompanied by fierce battles. How could a mountain contain 2 tigers? Not to mention, how could there be 2 voices in a country? If something were to happen, whose orders should they listen to? Jin Ing and Chao Jixiang quickly thought of this problem, and for a moment, their faces turned extremely nasty. They felt like they had been stumped by reality. Based on the current situation, it was clear that no one would back down so easily. The result was likely to be a clash of swords and weapons. With a great enemy like Walla by their side, any internal strife would only benefit others. In the side chamber, the atmosphere became extremely tense. The 3 of them didn't speak for a long time, each with their heads lowered, thinking about their own matters. Yang Chendong also had his head lowered, but he wasn't thinking about anything. Instead, he was resting with his eyes closed. He had hurried on his journey and hadn't had a good rest since returning. He was indeed a little sleepy. It was precisely because he was sleepy that he began to snore softly. This was so clear in the silent side chamber, so out of place. Cough, cough. Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang coughed softly at the same time, using this method to wake Yang Chendong up. There was movement. Yang Chendong had indeed woken up. When he raised his head, he met Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang's eyes. He smiled and said, "What? Have the two of you come to a conclusion? If you have, then please leave. Marquis has been hurrying on the road for days. He is indeed too tired." After he finished speaking, Yang Chendong slowly stood up. From the looks of it, it was clear that he wanted to leave this place and find a big bed to have a good sleep. Yang Chendong wanted to leave. This made Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang very anxious. They both knew that they couldn't make a decision on their own. If the other party was unwilling to give in, they wouldn't give in either. In the end, they would only meet in battle. This was an outcome that neither of them wanted to see, because no one could guarantee that they would be the victor. After thinking about it, he still needed Yang Chendong to be a partner, or a middleman, to give a balanced and reasonable way to deal with it. Since that was the case, how could they let him leave? At that moment, the two of them blocked Yang Chendong's path. "Marquis, we can't come to a conclusion. Can you please show us the way?" Chapter 161. You want me to lead the way? You trust Marquis that much? Yang Chendong was already familiar with his current identity. He spoke without missing the word "tho." Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang were not displeased at all. On the contrary, they both nodded solemnly with serious expressions. If that's the case, then Marquis will say a few words. As he spoke, Yang Chendong returned to his seat at the head of the table. All right. Let's ask Marquis to say a few words. No matter what your decision is, Emperor Daizong will seriously consider it and thank you. Jin Ying quickly expressed her determination. At the same time, she brought up Daizong's identity. Chao Jixiang naturally did not want to fall behind. He immediately said, "That's right. Marquis, please give us an idea. Emperor Yingzong was saved by you. I'm sure His Majesty will agree and be grateful for your decision." The two of them were equally matched. They both brought up the emperor behind them, reminding Yang Chendong that he had to treat them equally. Yang Chendong only smiled at the little tricks used by the two of them and did not expose them. He returned to his seat and took a sip of tea to moisten his throat. Then he slowly said, "Emperor Daizong's intention is to make Emperor Yingzong the retired emperor, right?" "That's right." Jin Ying nodded in response. "I'm sure Emperor Yingzong will not accept this. He's only in his early 20s. I'm sure no one would be willing to become the retired emperor." When Yang Chendong said this, he looked at Chao Jixiang and asked. "That's right. Yingzong was at the peak of the spring and autumn period. He could do a lot of things. How could he become the retired emperor?" Chao Jixiang also couldn't help but nod, praising Yang Chendong's words. "All right, I understand what you mean. Obviously, this title of retired emperor is not suitable. If we must do it this way, it is very likely that we will meet on the battlefield. When that time comes, the only thing that will be lost will be the vitality of my great Ming dynasty, and the ones who will die will be the warriors of the great Ming dynasty. But don't forget that Walla's army is on its way to the capital. Once it breaks through Juyong Pass, the gates to the capital will be wide open. At this time, we can't afford to be unstable. Otherwise, we'll be hurting our friends and rejoicing our enemies, right?" That's right. Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang both nodded in agreement with Yang Chendong's analysis of the situation. "Since we can't fight and we can't fight, then we can only negotiate. How about this? The acting great emperor doesn't need to talk about the retired great emperor. This will definitely not work." Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the cooperation of the two. This saved him a lot of effort. "That's right. Marquis is wise." Chao Jixiang could tell from these words that Yang Chendong was siding with Zhu Qizhen, so he hastily agreed. This made Jin Ying, who was at the side, a little unhappy. "What's wrong? We just promoted you to Valiant Marquis, and you're not even speaking for the acting great emperor?" But before Jin Ying could object, Yang Chendong turned to her and said, "The acting great emperor can't possibly abdicate the throne to Emperor Ingzong, who lost to the enemy on the battlefield, right?" When Yang Chendong said that Emperor Ingzong was a defeated emperor, Jin Ing was extremely happy, and she immediately agreed. Yes, it's only Marquis who has sharp eyes that can see through everything. But Yang Chendong only chuckled at this not-so-clever flattery, not minding it at all. Instead, he continued, "Then this matter is already extremely clear. Everyone has their own reasons, and both of you are emperors of the 9 and 5. Relying on the capital alone won't be enough to satisfy your needs. Why not shift your gaze elsewhere? Why must you stick to one place? The Great Ming doesn't just have one major city, the capital." But what is Marquis' intention? When Jin Ing and Chao Jixiang heard this, they were stunned. They did not understand what Yang Chendong meant. "Haha, this isn't Marquis' intention. The two of you asked me for advice, so I had no choice but to come up with this idea. Of course, this idea might not be very clever, but if eunuchs don't think it's appropriate, you can just pretend that Marquis didn't say anything." Yang Chendong chuckled, putting on a nonchalant expression. In fact, this result was within his expectations. In fact, he had already made preparations for this when Ingzong set out for the war. Yang Chendong had come up with the idea, but he didn't want to take the blame. Jin Ing and Chao Jixiang were both shrewd people, so how could they not understand the meaning behind these words? The two of them immediately nodded. "Yes, we asked Marquis for the idea. None of this matter has anything to do with eunuch." "Very good. Since that's the case, I'll add a few words. Since the capital can only have one emperor, why can't Emperor Ingzong give up this place? For example, if you go to the capital of Nanjing, the climate there is pleasant, and it's no less prosperous than the capital. It already has other palaces and palaces. It truly is a place where dragons flourish." Under their gazes, Yang Chendong finally revealed the ultimate goal of his plan, which was to divide the Great Ming dynasty into two. Go to Nanjing? Chao Jixiang's eyes widened. It seemed that this result was completely out of his expectations. It was also something that he had never thought of before. It wasn't just Chao Jixiang. Even Jin Ing fell silent. Similarly, the result was somewhat out of his expectations. He had originally believed that as long as he could rope in Yang Chendong, he would be able to learn of Emperor Ingzong's whereabouts. Afterward, he would send an army to bring Emperor Emeritus back to the capital and place him under house arrest. But now, it seemed that Yang Chendong would not betray Emperor Ingzong. Not only that, he even had the idea of allowing Emperor Ingzong to continue as emperor. Fortunately, he was not allowed to return to the capital, which could be considered as speaking on Dai Zong's behalf. Yang Chendong had proposed the plan, but whether or not they would do it was not up to him to decide. However, he believed that his idea would be the most perfect one after considering all the situations. Chao Jixiang fell silent as he mentally weighed the feasibility of this plan. Dai Zong was now emperor in the capital and wielded great power. If Emperor Ingzong returned, there was a high chance that he would be captured and then placed under house arrest with the title of Emperor Emeritus until he died. If this was the case, anyone who had pledged allegiance to Emperor Ingzong could easily imagine their fate. Since he had no confidence, he might as well go to Nanjing and proclaim himself emperor. Given that Emperor Ingzong had been emperor for so many years, he should be able to quickly accumulate a powerful force. At that time, he would have the choice of remaining in Nanjing or fighting his way back to the capital. In this way, Yang Chendong's plan could not be considered wrong. On the other end, Jin Ing was also considering Yang Chendong's proposal. It was true that Dai Zong was emperor and that he controlled the capital. But his ascension to the throne had not been justified, and he had only been on the throne for such a short period of time. Who knew what those important officials in the capital were thinking? If they supported Emperor Ingzong, wouldn't Dai Zong's position be at risk? If that was the case, what sort of role would he be playing and where would he go? Speaking of which, even if Dai Zong won, he would probably be riddled with wounds, perhaps even greatly weakened. What strength would he have left to resist the Walla's army? And if he was ultimately defeated by the foreigners, he would not have a good end either. It was better to just let Emperor Ingzong proclaim himself emperor in Nanjing. As long as he developed well, there was no need to worry about the day when he could reunite the country. Dai Zong would have more time to prepare, and Jin Ying would be able to obtain even more benefits. The two of them had different thoughts, but their final decision was the same. After some thought, Chao Jixiang made a temporary decision. Okay, I agree. This duke will do his best to persuade Emperor Ingzong, but there are still some conditions. For example, the families of Kuang Yi and the other important officials are still in the capital and need you to let them go. In addition, if other officials are willing to go with Emperor Ingzong, you are not allowed to stop them. Everything is up to them. This was a temporary decision because Chao Jixiang could not represent Emperor Ingzong. He could only act as a lobbyist. Ji Ning had also made her decision. She felt that Chao Jixiang's conditions were reasonable, but she stated that she would have to go back and consult Dai Zong Emperor Zhu Qiu before she could give a final answer. In front of Yang Chendong, the two of them discussed a few general issues, but they did not discuss the details. This was because they were both keenly aware that anything that was too detailed would end in the end. Both sides would have to send representatives for more detailed discussions before they could reach a conclusion. This included the territories under the jurisdiction of the two emperors. Yang Chendong was only responsible for the two of them. As for whether they succeeded or not, and what else they had to do after they succeeded, he would not interfere. By doing all this, he already had suspicions that he had exceeded his authority. He did not want to interfere in every matter and end up being hated by others. Although Ji Ning had not learned of Ingzong's whereabouts from Yang Chendong, she had managed to protect Dai Zong's position and returned satisfied. She left Chao Jixiang alone in the side hall. He had to see Emperor Ingzong before he could do anything. Marquis will arrange for someone to lead you to Emperor Ingzong. You can do as you see fit. Oh right, when you leave, remember to bring Empress Chen with you. I think she will cooperate with you to do some things. Looking at Chao Jixiang, who was standing there with a longing expression, Yang Chendong left these words before he got up and left the side hall. Now that he had succeeded, he could finally have a good rest for a few days. Of course, some people might ask, why did Yang Chendong give up such a good opportunity to control the emperor and give it to Chao Jixiang when he already had actual control over Zhu Qizhen? This was where Yang Chendong was smart. Mingzong had ascended to the throne, and Ingzong was naturally weaker. In addition, Yang Chendong had played a balancing role in the middle. It could be seen that in the future, no matter who it was, it would be very difficult to have the great Ming dynasty alone. Since Ingzong was no longer the one and only emperor whose words carried enormous weight, why did Yang Chendong want to hold him in his hands and make him the target of public criticism? With an emperor by his side, he would have to ask for instructions from time to time, and he would even have to kneel. How could it compare to the pleasure and satisfaction of being an independent third party? Chapter 162. Chao Jixiang had some ability. Once he developed, he wouldn't be too far off from Wang Zhen. But it was precisely because he had the ability that he could better assist Zhu Qizhen. Otherwise, if he was an idiot, it wouldn't be long before he was eaten up by Ji Ning. The sixth young master didn't want either side to become stronger. What he needed was balance. Only then could he show his importance. Yang Chendong would have more room to display his abilities. The two emperors kept each other in check, so he could be sandwiched between them and reap the benefits. Now that the matter is settled, the next step is to prepare for the war. That's right. Is there any news from Crimson City? Yang Chendong returned to the study and looked at Tiger's Mane. They're already on their way to the capital. They're coming in small groups so that they won't attract attention. Tiger's Mane knew what Yang Chendong was asking about and respectfully replied. The sixth young master who had grown up with him was now Marquis. The young master wasn't even 20 yet, but his future was bright. Tiger's Mane wouldn't be a nobody if he followed such a master. Alright, I understand. The young master is sleepy. If there's nothing important, don't call me. Yang Chendong waved his hand and walked toward the bedroom next to the study. Hu Yen, Xiao Yin, and the others had been waiting there for a long time. Although they might not be able to do anything with them around, it was still better to be with beauties than with those incomplete eunuchs who only knew how to fight for power. On the road 5 li away from the Yang clan manor, The bustling scene had disappeared. After Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang left, Tang Tong, who had stayed behind, was also taken away. Tang Tong had chosen to leave with Jin Ying. This was Yang Chendong's intention. He didn't keep idle people here. Unless it was Yang Xie's personal army, he couldn't be at ease with anyone guarding the Yang family manor. As for who Tang Tong would choose to leave with, Yang Chendong didn't ask. Instead, he left the decision to himself. When Jin Ying and Chao Jixiang had both extended an olive branch to him, he had ultimately chosen to return to the capital with Jin Ying. His subordinates had all settled down in the capital, and if he were to go somewhere else, the morale of the army would be shaken. Jin Ying had brought 3,000 embroidered uniform guards with her when she came. When she returned, she brought 4,000 men with her. As soon as he entered the capital, he went straight to the imperial city to ask Zhu Qiyu about his plans. In the inner hall of the palace, after Zhu Qiyu learned about Jin Ying's experience at Yangjia village, he frowned. A country divided into two emperors. Won't this cause the great Ming dynasty to be divided? No matter what, Zhu Qiyu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. He also valued the Zhu family's country very much. It was not unreasonable for him to have such thoughts. Jin Ying didn't think too much about it. He just wanted to hold on to power. As for whether or not the country would be divided, that was a matter for the future. Your Majesty, this subject also knows that this is not a perfect plan, but I truly cannot think of a better one. Once Ying Zong returns to the capital, he will not allow himself to be captured without a fight. After all, he has been emperor for so many years, and many people are loyal to him. If he raises his arm and receives even more support, we might not even have a place to stay. It would be better to slow down for now. I trust that with your Majesty's benevolence, it won't be long before you have even more people sincerely submit to you. At that time, wouldn't it be very easy for the realm to fall into your Majesty's hands? Jin Ying placed Zhu Qiyu in a very high position, her eyes brimming with confidence. These words spurred Zhu Qiyu on, filling him with confidence for the future. Fine. This is all we can do. But we still need to prevent even more officials from leaving with Ying Zong. We will leave this matter to you. Jin Ying patted his chest and promised, Your Majesty, be at ease. This subject will definitely not allow any more officials to leave the capital. This was a chance to prove himself. If he did a good job, Dai Zong would naturally think highly of him. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. Hebei's Baoding Prefecture, a strategic town more than 300 li from the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. At this time, Zhu Qizhen was resting here under the protection of Yang Wu and Xiao Feng. Now that he was in Baoding Prefecture, he was able to obtain some news from the capital. When he heard that his younger brother, Zhu Qiyu, had ascended to the throne and taken the title of Emperor Jing, Zhu Qizhen's rage was easy to imagine. He had kindly allowed his brother to supervise the country, but now that he was gone, his brother had proclaimed himself emperor and seized all his property. No one would be able to accept this. Logically speaking, he should have charged back to the capital and questioned his brother about what he was up to. But this was not a child's play. If it was not done well, he was afraid that he would not be able to return alive. Zhu Qizhen suppressed the anger in his heart and stopped at Baoding Mansion, waiting for Yang Chendong to send back the news. In the Tuma Fortress incident, Zhu Qizhen had seen how formidable Yang Chendong was. His actions could be said to be a model example of preparing for a rainy day. This was especially true for this mercenary army. On their way here, they had killed almost all the threats in the bud. Just based on what he saw, he didn't know how many groups of Vala cavalry had been wiped out before they could discover them. Their methods were powerful, their training was thorough, and their movements were nimble. Not even the elites of the Great Ming Dynasty could compare to them. After Yang Chendong left, Zhu Qizhen had communicated with Xiao Feng many times, hoping to use this army for his own use. He had even tried to tempt them with the promise of a beautiful future. But the results were not very good. After interacting with them, he realized that this was an army that only recognized money and not people. According to Xiao Feng, as long as you gave them money, they would work for you. As for promises, they could forget about them. They were far less practical than money. Moreover, because of Zhu Qizhen's status, Xiaofeng's hiring fee was 3 times that of Yang Qindong's. In other words, for every mission, a group of 100 people would need at least 3 million taels of silver, and this was the kind that had to be paid in advance. The army had been defeated and all their weapons had been lost. Where would Zhu Qizhen find the money to support such a large expenditure? He could only think of transferring money from the national treasury after entering the capital. But now that Zhu Qiyu was the emperor, he could forget about the national treasury. This made Zhu Qizhen feel even more dejected. At one point, Zhu Qizhen even had to consider where he would go in the future. If Yang Qindong did not care about him, what would he do? He would not even have the ability to protect himself. This worry disappeared without a trace 3 days later. Chao Jixiang arrived, and with him were 3,000 embroidered uniform guards. Under the lead of Beta Persei, Chao Jixiang successfully reported to Yingzong. As soon as he saw Yingzong, he immediately knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" At this moment, Zhu Qizhen felt a sense of superiority. He even had the thought of bringing an army to the capital to seize the throne. Just as this thought appeared, he saw Xiaofeng and the others leave. The heroic spirit that had just appeared in his heart disappeared without a trace. After seeing the strength of this mercenary army, he began to despise the embroidered uniform guards in his heart. Chao Jixiang arrived, and after seeing Yingzong and the 9 officials, he gave them a detailed account of what had happened in the capital. At the end, he even mentioned that Yang Qindong had been made a marquis and his idea of 2 emperors ruling the country. 2 emperors ruling the country? After hearing Chao Jixiang's recount, Minister of War Kuang Yi and Minister of Revenue Wang Zhuo glanced at each other. How could they not know that doing this would be tantamount to splitting the great Ming dynasty? However, what better way was there to deal with this than now? Different from Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo, the other 7 officials were secretly happy. If Zhu Qizhen really went to Nanjing and proclaimed himself as emperor, then it was obvious that they would be promoted by 1 or even 2 ranks. For example, the Right Assistant Minister of Justice Ding Xian could become the Minister of Justice. The Right Assistant Minister of Works Wang Yonghe could also become the Minister of Works. The Left Assistant Minister of Rights Yang Shan would become the Minister of Rights. And the Right Deputy Imperial Censorate Deng Li would also be promoted by 1 rank and become the Imperial Censorate. This was a real benefit. Originally, they had lost the battle together and were prepared to be demoted or even lose their positions. Now, they could even be promoted by 1 rank. Who wouldn't be happy? After the officials received the benefits, they would naturally try to persuade Zhu Qizhen to go to Nanjing and proclaim himself as emperor. Regarding this, Zhu Qizhen did not immediately make a decision. Instead, he said that he needed to think about it. Empress Qian also came. Mao Mu had taken over the role of the eunuch of Xing. He had served the empress well and had gained her trust. In this small courtyard of Baoding Mansion, the husband and wife met. Empress Qian's tears flowed out uncontrollably. "Empress, don't cry. I'm fine." Holding Empress Qian's arm, Zhu Qizhen's face showed a rare trace of gentleness. "Well, as long as the emperor is fine, as long as the emperor is fine. I think it's better for the emperor to go to Nanjing and proclaim himself as emperor. No matter what, you can be safe for a while." Empress Qian took the initiative to talk about moving south, which was completely different from her usual politics. Zhu Qizhen was very curious about Empress Qian's dissuasion. "Why does the emperor say so? Did others teach you?" "No." Empress Qian shook her head. "Your concubine has lived in the palace for a long time and has seen that the Mastiff King has managed the imperial city well, and with the assistance of eunuch Jin Ying and the others, he now holds great power. If the emperor were to go to the capital, there would definitely be a major battle. In this case, the odds are against you." Originally, Zhu Qizhen had thought that Empress Qian had been instigated to say such words of dissuasion. Now, hearing this, Zhu Qizhen understood that the situation in the capital had truly changed. Even the empress, who rarely asked about politics, could sense it. As he cursed Zhu Qiyu, Jin Ying, and the others for being shameless, he began to consider the matter of moving south. That night, Zhu Qizhen appeared in front of Chao Jixiang and the other officials, his face radiant. He said that he agreed to move south, but he could not let the Mastiff King off so easily. He wanted to go to the capital to ask for people and money, as well as the families of the officials, especially Crown Prince Zhu Jianxian, to be brought out of the imperial city. As long as Zhu Qizhan agreed, the other officials naturally would not object. After 2 days of discussion, they came up with a plan. In the end, Chao Jixiang led 1,000 embroidered uniform guards to escort Kuang Yi and Wang Zhou to the capital to negotiate with Zhu Qiyu. Chapter 163. The Capital. News suddenly emerged that Zhu Qizhan did not die on the battlefield. It was only a substitute for Hu Ben that had died. This news was like a gust of wind that had grown wings, quickly reaching the homes of the officials. For a moment, many of them were shocked and at a loss of what to do. 5 days after the news appeared, Kuang Yi and Wang Zhou, who had followed Ying Zong to the battlefield, entered the capital under the protection of 1,000 embroidered uniform guards. Their appearance confirmed the news. Soon after, another piece of news appeared. Ying Zong would not return to the capital and would instead accompany Nanjing to proclaim himself as emperor. For a time, the great Ming would have 2 emperors ruling together. For a good country to have 2 emperors, although they were both surnamed Zhu and shared the same ancestor, it could not be considered a split. However, as time passed, the situation would naturally develop. Many far-sighted officials could see this fact. However, before they could wonder why such a change had occurred, another piece of news appeared that made them dizzy. Ying Zong would need many officials to proclaim himself as emperor in Nanjing. If any of the officials in the capital were willing, they could follow Kuang Yi and Wang Zhou to Nanjing to take up their posts. Should they pledge loyalty to the current substitute Emperor Zhu Qiyu or the previous Emperor Zhu Qizhan? This was a choice that was placed in front of the officials. For a moment, each of the officials began to make their own calculations and began to consider the gains and losses in this matter. Compared to the officials in the capital who had to make a choice about their future, Yang Chendong in the Yang family manor was very carefree. He spent his days writing and painting in the manor or improving his relationship with his women. He was extremely busy. It was worth mentioning that during these few days of rest, Yang Chendong had taken in Lady Xiang. This woman, who looked like the young 13th mistress, had a strange fragrance and an enchanting figure, which made him fall into a land of gentleness, making him feel very uncomfortable. On the other hand, although Hu Yen had a few intimate actions with Yang Chendong, she had always scrupulously adhered to her bottom line. In her words, the first time had to be reserved for the wedding night in Lulang. Yang Chendong did not insist on this. When it came to matters of the heart, he had always pursued success when the conditions were right. He would never force anyone. Beta Persei, Yang Wu, and Xiao Feng returned to Yang Manor and set up a tight blockade around the perimeter. Yang Chendong, who had always attached great importance to his own safety, would never allow anyone to have the possibility of threatening his safety. Just like that, the days passed in a seemingly pleasant manner. Until a guest suddenly came to visit. Yang Chendong had no choice but to welcome him personally. He even went to the entrance of the manor. It was for no other reason than the fact that the person who had come was the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, Hu Changning, Hu Yan's father. In terms of official position, Hu Changning could be considered Yang Chendong's subordinate, so he did not need to personally welcome him. But from Hu Yan's point of view, Yang Chendong had to personally welcome him to show his sincerity and politeness. Hu Changning only brought Gao Sheng, a lieutenant. When the two of them successfully arrived at the entrance of Yang Manor, they saw Yang Chendong standing at the entrance. Beside him stood Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, 2 servants. Yang Chendong was first conferred the title of Loyal Earl by Ying Zong to thank him for saving his life on the battlefield. Then, he was conferred the title of Loyal Marquis by Dai Zong. At the same time, he also held the position of Commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. If the former was an empty position, then the latter was real power. He was not even 20 years old, yet he had received such an honor. This was extremely rare even when the Great Ming Dynasty was founded. Yang Chendong did it. The most important thing was that when Hu Changning arrived, he was still able to stand at the entrance and greet him. Just this alone made Hu Changning's originally cold face a little more gentle. Greetings to Uncle Hu. When Hu Changning rode closer, Yang Chendong cupped his fists and greeted him with the etiquette of a junior. This showed that he did not intend to talk to him in terms of official position, which allowed Hu Changning to avoid a lot of awkwardness. Good, the sixth young master is young and promising, making people envious. I believe that official Yang would be very gratified if he knew in the underworld. Since Yang Chendong did not greet him in terms of official position, Hu Changning spoke in terms of human relations. When he said these words, there was no doubt that he was an elder. Please. Yang Chendong smiled at Hu Changning and then made an inviting gesture. Beta Persei took the initiative to lead the horse, and the uncle and nephew walked side by side from the entrance to the Yang clan manor. In the main hall, the guest and the host sat down, and Xiao Yin personally served tea to Hu Changning. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at this maid who had been serving Yang Chendong since childhood. Sure enough, she was very beautiful. Seeing Xiao Yin, Hu Changning naturally asked about his daughter. When he found out that Hu Yen had secretly left home and went to the Yang clan manor, her father was naturally furious. But at the time, Dai Zong had just ascended the throne, and because he was afraid that the officials below him would cause trouble, he was confined at home and could not go out. Later on, when the situation was not so tense, the news of Yang Chendong's return spread to the capital. Moreover, he heard that there were several storms outside the Yang clan manor, making it impossible for him to come. Finally, when the Yang clan manor had obtained a temporary peace, he took the initiative to visit. First, he wanted to see his daughter. If possible, it would be better to bring her back. After all, Hu Yan's actions at the time could be called world-shocking. Second, he wanted to ask Yang Chendong about Ying Zong's situation. More importantly, he wanted to know what choice the Hu clan would make in the dual emperor reign. When he saw Xiao Yin, Hu Zhangning opened his mouth and said, "My beloved daughter has accompanied the Yang family's seventh sister to the Yang manor for some time now. Her grandmother and mother miss her very much. Would it be possible for her to return to the Hu estate with me?" Accompanying Yang duo to the Yang clan manor was just an excuse. After all, a girl's reputation was very important. In the face of Hu Changning's tactful request to bring Hu Yen back, Yang Chendong naturally had no reason to refuse. "Okay, Xiao Yin, go inform Yen to return to the Hu estate." Xiao Yin agreed and turned to leave. However, the bystanders couldn't see that there was a trace of reluctance on her face. Ever since Yang Chendong called the girls together and made a few requests, they became a group of fighting. They really were like sisters. They already had very deep feelings for each other. The news of Hu Changning's arrival at the Yang clan manor quickly spread to the rear court. Hu Yen was clearly a bit out of her wits. After adapting to life in the Yang clan manor, she didn't want to go back. However, she knew that Yang Chendong had no reason to refuse her father. Xiao Yin saw that Hu Yen was worried and volunteered to serve tea in the front hall. She wanted to inquire about the news. She didn't expect that the young master would so readily agree to Hu Changning's request. How could she not be disappointed? When Xiao Yin left and only Yang Chendong, Hu Changning, and Tiger's Mane were left in the room, Lord Hu showed a hesitant expression. "Uncle Hu, if you have something to say, just say it. There are no outsiders here." When Yang Chendong said there were no outsiders, he naturally meant Tiger's Mane, who was always in charge of protecting him. It's actually nothing much. I'm sure the sixth young master already knows about the dual emperor rule. However, I don't know what your choice will be. Will you go to Nanjing or continue to stay here?" Hu Changning asked with an awkward expression. No matter what, he was a man of 40 years old. When he encountered something, it was fine if he didn't have any ideas. However, he actually wanted to ask Yang Chendong, who was much younger than him. This made him feel a little embarrassed. However, this was what his father, Hu Ming, wanted. Hu Ming's original words were, "Ask the loyal marquis whether you want to go or stay." This matter was originally caused by him. I'm sure he already has a judgment. Thus, this trip to the Yang clan manor was made. Picking up his daughter was only one of the reasons. His true goal was to find out what Yang Chendong's intentions were. Me. Yang Chendong pointed at himself, then chuckled. Of course I can't leave. There's the Yang clan manor here, and there's the sky beyond heaven and the immortal abode in the capital. If I leave, I'm afraid that these properties will be seized by others. Yang Chendong expressed that he wouldn't leave, but his reason was that his properties were all here, and it wasn't convenient for him to leave. This answer clearly didn't satisfy Hu Changning. I'm sure the sixth young master has made quite a bit of money these days. Why would he care about this little bit of silver? That's true, but who in this world would complain about having too much money? Isn't that right, Uncle Hu? Yang Chendong maintained his usual smile. It seemed incomparably sincere, but it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Hu Changning couldn't see through Yang Chendong's thoughts, so he could only smile. But after smiling, his expression began to fluctuate. It was clear that he was wondering whether or not he should directly ask Yang Chendong what the Hu clan should do in the face of two emperors. Asking too much would only make him seem incompetent, but before he came, his father had repeatedly warned him that he had to ask Yang Chendong's intentions. If it was just for the sake of face, wouldn't he have made this trip in vain? Wouldn't he have failed to live up to his father's expectations? Hu Zhangning, who had something on his mind, looked unhappy and even had some entanglements. All of this was seen by Yang Chendong. He knew that this was his future father-in-law, so he couldn't not give him face. He smiled and took the initiative to ask, Uncle Hu, what do you and Grandpa Hu think about the matter of two emperors? He really didn't want to call Yang Chendong Grandpa, but given their seniority, Yang Chendong had no choice but to do so. But when he did, he still felt a little awkward. Hu Changning hadn't thought about this. He was just worrying about how to ask this question, and now that Yang Chendong had taken the initiative to ask, he was immediately overjoyed. In truth, I would like to hear Honorable Nephew's opinion on this matter. I can't speak of an opinion, but if I must, I would like to give Uncle Hu 4 lines of poetry, Yang Chendong said with a smile. Chapter 164. What are the 4 sentences? Hu Zhangning's interest was piqued. Everyone said that Yang Chendong was a genius. Presumably, the following words would not disappoint him. Sure enough, after Yang Chendong pondered for a moment, he slowly opened his mouth and said, If he is strong, then he is strong. If he is strong, then he is strong. If he is tyrannical, then he is tyrannical. The moon shines over the river. This was the record of the 9 Yang divine art in the heavenly sword and dragon saber. It meant that no matter how strong or fierce the enemy was, one could treat it as a breeze blowing over the mountain. The moon shines over the river. Although it could affect one's body, it could not cause the slightest harm. However, how could one not harm one's body? It meant that in the face of the chaos of the outside world, as long as one stayed strong and worked hard to improve one's abilities in all aspects, one would be unharmed. Hu Ming was originally a capable official and had been the Minister of Rights for many years. It could be said that he had disciples all over the world. His son, Hu Zhangning, had also grown up. With this kind of strength, whether it was following Yingzong or Daizong, there would not be any problems. As long as he stayed within his position, no one could easily touch him. Not to mention, there was also Yang Chendong helping from the side. He would not watch as something happened to the Hu family. In history, even when Yingzong ascended to the throne, until his death, Hu Ming was still firmly seated in the high position of the Minister of Rights. It was not until he was over 80 years old that he resigned from his position after Yingzong succeeded in seizing the family. From this, it could be seen that he was originally an evergreen tree in the bureaucracy. How could anyone move him just because they wanted to? Hu Zhangning did not think so much at this time. He was still repeating the 4 sentences that Yang Chendong said. After pondering over it, a smile slowly appeared on his face. Obviously, he had understood Yang Chendong's meaning. He was warning him that the most important thing was to improve his own strength. As for whether he followed Yingzong or Daizong, he could do it with ease. Many thanks. After understanding everything, Hu Zhangning immediately cupped his fist and bowed to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong naturally could not accept it. He immediately bowed back. Then, the two looked at each other and smiled. After Hu Zhangning got the result he wanted, he left. Hu Yan also left with him. When she left, her eyes were filled with reluctance. Yang Chendong felt very sorry for Hu Yan. Seeing her get into the carriage and about to leave, he suddenly cupped his fists to Hu Zhangning and said, "Uncle Hu, in a moment, nephew will send someone to the Hu estate to discuss marriage. Please allow me to marry Yan." Hu Zhangning's expression faltered slightly upon hearing this before a look of elation appeared on his face. Good, good, I'll go back and tell father, mother, and Yenner's mother about this. Thank you for your trouble. Yang Chendong continued to thank him with cupped fists. When he looked towards the carriage, Hu Yan's face was already flushed red. It was impossible to tell if she was happy or excited. Tiger's mane saw everything. He walked up to Yang San and patted him on the shoulder. All right, the more casual young master is with you, the more he doesn't treat you as an outsider. You should be happy. Also, can't you see how busy the young master is? The wedding is near, and the young master has to personally plan and participate in everything. It's a pity that there's not much we can do to help. By the way, when the young master is celebrating, there can be no accidents. If anyone has the intention to cause trouble, there's no need to report it. Just kill them. If there's any responsibility, I'll bear it. Yes, there won't be any mistakes. Don't worry, Chief. When Yang San said this, his eyes narrowed, and a cold aura emanated from his body. Without Yang Chendong, he wouldn't be where he was today. If anyone dared to cause trouble on the wedding day, they'd definitely be tired of living. Soon, they'd become a corpse without any warmth. Yang San left quietly, just like how he had come. Even in the Yang manor, very few people had seen him, and even fewer people knew of him. He was also the strongest hidden chess piece in the Yang family system. Usually, he wouldn't appear in front of everyone, but once he appeared, it often meant that something important was going to happen. Yang Chendong didn't ask when Yang San left. At this time, he was teaching the servant, Yang Si, how to use the camera. That's right, the camera. This was something that shouldn't appear in this era, because Yang Chendong's wedding had been taken out. If there was something good, it had to be used. Only in this way could its value be reflected. Although taking out the camera was indeed a bit too shocking, in order to leave this beautiful memory and commemoration, Yang Chendong still did it without hesitation. As soon as this camera that could capture a person's shadow appeared, it immediately attracted a lot of exclamations. If Yang Chendong hadn't been prepared, Yang Si, who had just received it, would have directly thrown it to the ground. People in ancient times were very superstitious. They believed that the shadow was also an important part of the body. They even believed that their 7 souls and 6 spirits could be hidden in it. Now that this thing could clearly capture a person's shadow and even project it, it was no wonder that people were afraid. Xiao Yin was a bit braver. Of course, this didn't mean that she wasn't afraid of anything, but because her relationship with Yang Chendong was closer than others. Naturally, this question was left to her to ask. Young master, what kind of witchcraft is this? It can capture a person's shadow. Will it turn the person who is captured into an idiot? Yang Chendong's mouth was wide open. He was stunned by the question. Yang Chendong's ability to adapt was originally very strong, but he was still defeated by this sudden and unexpected question. Seeing that Xiao Yin didn't seem to be joking and had a very serious expression, he helplessly shook his head and explained, "This is an advanced product brought about by scientific advancement. As for the specific principles, I'm afraid that young master can't explain it clearly to you. But don't worry, this thing can't capture a person's soul, so don't worry." When Yang Chendong said not to worry, Xiao Yin seemed to feel a lot more at ease. At least she dared to walk in front of the camera and even dared to make a few poses that she thought were beautiful. But the others didn't have that much courage. Every time Yang Si raised the camera and pointed it at them, there would always be a burst of chaos and shouting. It felt like a machine gun that could kill people. Wherever it aimed, people would fall to the ground. The camera was just a killing machine. In addition, Yang Chendong also took out a lot of new songs. For example, Huafeng's Big Bridal Sedan, Intimate Lover, Full Moonflower, and the ready-made Wedding March that he had prepared beforehand. For this, he took out a set of audio equipment from the big warehouse and charged it up in the big warehouse. He was only waiting for the wedding day to use it. In addition, Yang Chendong also prepared a very luxurious carriage. The wheels were made of soft rubber tires taken from the big warehouse. There were even shock absorbers installed on the carriage to ensure its comfort. The outside of the carriage was filled with all kinds of colored balloons, making it look very beautiful and beautiful. At the same time, he also made a few sets of beautiful wedding dresses according to his own design. These were all custom-made by the Crimson City's clothing factory. The factory's director, Zhou Hua, personally supervised the completion. It was said that when making these new wedding dresses, her daughter, Luan Xiaoyu, who was the Crimson City's publicity team leader, cried because of it. Luan Xiaoyu had reached the age where she knew about feelings. She had long regarded herself as the sixth young master's woman. It was just that because she was still young, she had no chance to be Yang Chendong's wife. Seeing the man she liked was going to marry someone else, how could she not be sad? For this matter, her father Luan Qi, the director of the power plant, and mother Zhou Hua, the director of the clothing factory, talked to her for a long time. They said that a capable person like the sixth young master was destined to have more than one woman. Xiaoyu grew up quickly. When she grew up, she would naturally have the opportunity to become the sixth young master's woman. Moreover, several sets of wedding dresses were taken out. Except for one set that was sent to Hu Yen in the Hu Mansion, the others were taken away by Qiaoyin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang. In their words, they were also attending the wedding day. According to Yang Chendong's intention, they were going to be the bridesmaids of the bride, but in fact, they were also completing their wedding with sixth young master. In this regard, Yang Chendong acquiesced. In the feudal society, even the emperor only had one empress. It was impossible for him to have several wives at the same time, so it was impossible for him to give them a grand wedding. Therefore, it was a good thing to take this opportunity to hold all of them together. The bride had a wedding dress, and Yang Chendong prepared a suit for himself. The pure white suit was tailor-made, making Yang Chendong look more handsome and sunny. As the groomsmen, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Wu were dressed in black suits, looking very energetic. As for the several servants, Yang San, as the deputy director of the security bureau and the actual helmsman, naturally had to protect everything in the dark. Yang Lu was responsible for the security on the surface. In this way, the manpower was put to good use. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the 6th day of October, the Yang family manor was already decorated with festive decorations. Colored balls, ribbons, and bright red, happy characters were posted everywhere. In front of Yang Xi's camera, amid a burst of firecrackers, the wedding procession set off just as dawn broke. Yang Chendong, dressed in a white suit, was sitting in a special carriage. Beside him were Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. Yang Wu was in charge of driving the carriage. Under the protection of Yang Lu, Qiu Vi, and Dao Xiao, they went to the capital. In the dark, Xiao Feng and Leng Feng were on guard at all times to ensure the safety of the young master. The Hu Mansion in the capital was also decorated with ribbons, giving people a feeling of jubilation. Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, Madame Xiang, and the others had arrived at the Hu Mansion a day in advance to accompany Hu Yen through the most difficult night before dawn. When the sky brightened, the women began to get busy and put on the new wedding dresses that had never been seen before. On the side of the road leading to the Hu Mansion, there were already embroidered uniform guards standing guard. Chapter 165. After a portion of the officials left for Nanjing to follow Yingzong, the remaining officials in the capital were all restored to their original positions. Hu Zhangning was also restored to his position as the guardian of the embroidered uniform guard. In addition, Yang Chendong was still the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, so it was only natural that he would send some embroidered uniform guards to help out. Not only that, but Yang Chendong also ordered that any embroidered uniform guard who came to help out would be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. For a time, the embroidered uniform guard fought amongst themselves for this mission. Those who were able to come here could be considered lucky. When the time came, the carriage from the Yang clan arrived in front of the Hu estate. Yang Chendong, dressed in a white suit, stepped out of the spacious carriage. The wedding ceremony had officially begun. The Immortal Abode's band was already waiting for Yang Chendong to arrive. The music began to play, and could be faintly heard from several streets away. Hu Yen, who was dressed like a fairy in a white wedding dress, walked up to Yang Chendong, accompanied by Qiao Yin, Madame Snow, and the bride, who were also wearing a wedding dress and looked very beautiful. Hu Yan's blushing face perfectly explained what it meant to put the moon and flowers to shame. What was different from the other women was that there were two children who were only 5 or 6 years old standing behind Hu Yan, a boy and a girl who looked like a golden couple. They each pulled up a corner of the white wedding dress so that the long, fluttering wedding dress would not fall to the ground, but also showed her magnanimity. There was no red veil. This was Yang Chendong's idea. After reporting this to the Hu clan, Yang Chendong received their support. Thus, Yang Chendong took the bride, Hu Yen, who could walk on her own, to the Hu clan's main hall. Here, they knelt down and kowtowed to Hu Zhangning and his wife. The completion of this step was completely recorded by the camera. From the footage, it could be seen that Hu Zhangning and Madame Shui's faces were extremely pale. It was clear that they were also frightened by the equipment that could record their figures. After paying his respects to the elders, Yang Chendong carried Hu Yen out of the Hu estate. Along the way, the courtyard was filled with all kinds of gifts that Yang Chendong had given to the Hu clan. There was no need to introduce the types of items. In short, someone had calculated the total value of these items after the event. The total value of these items was over 1 million taels of silver. Just this amount alone was enough to shock countless people. This was one of the most beautiful stories in the capital, because not even the emperor would be willing to part with so many good things. From this matter, it could also be seen that Yang Chendong valued Hu Yen. The inside and outside of the Immortal Abode were already packed with people. In order to congratulate the patriarch on his wedding today, all the diners will have a 50% discount. Even the commoners who didn't come to the Immortal Abode to spend money could still enjoy the delicacies they had prepared. The premise was that the whole family had to come together. At the very least, the couple had to bring a child and bring their own lunch boxes. At that time, all the children who came would receive a delicious little pastry. The news had been released 3 days ago. By morning, the entire street in front of the Immortal Abode was packed with people. As a result, the embroidered uniform guards who were responsible for the security of the area were given a lot more work to do. Fortunately, the people who came to receive the delicacies and pastries were all very well behaved. Some entered and some left, so there wasn't much panic. After leaving the Hu estate, the bridegroom, Yang Chendong, personally drove the carriage. Hu Yen, Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang were seated inside. Yang Chendong, who was driving the carriage, sang the bridal sedan in fear. Tiger's Mane and the others, who had long since learned how to sing, sang along loudly. When the sun comes out, I climb the mountain. When I reach the peak, I want to sing. My song floats to my little sister. When she hears my song, she smiles. Yang Chendong's cheerful voice rang out. Sitting in the spacious and comfortable carriage, Hu Yen and the other girls were filled with happiness. As they looked at the brightly colored balloons around the carriage, their faces were brimming with happiness. The carriage passed through the streets of the Immortal Abode. Along the way, one new song after another could be heard. All of them were joyous songs that suited the occasion, and the people who had come along to watch the show all cheered with joy. As they passed through the streets of the Immortal Abode and saw the crowded streets, Hu Yen and the other girls smiled at each other. This was the young master doing a good deed, as well as accumulating good karma. Although he had to spend some money to do so, in the eyes of the girls, the significance of this action was far more profound. The carriage finally left the capital, and under the protection of the embroidered uniform guards, it headed for the Yang clan manor. At this time, there were all sorts of carriages and bridal sedan chairs waiting outside the Yang clan manor. Many officials of the court were waiting here for the bridegroom to arrive. He had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, less than 2 years. However, Yang Chendong had used his own efforts to prove his strength. With money and power, who wouldn't give him this little bit of face? And this wasn't even mentioning the fact that he was marrying the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Under the witness of many honored guests, Yang Chendong took Hu Yan's arm and led her to the main hall of the Yang clan manor, where the two principals were already seated. Yang Chendong and his wife were no longer present, so the ones presiding over Yang Chendong's wedding were his big brother Yang Gong and big sister Yang Fei. The entire Yang clan had come to Yang Chendong's wedding, and even his second brother Yang Rang was in the crowd. However, it was clear that his complexion was rather unsightly. He had originally believed that with his sixth brother dead, he, as the second brother, would be able to openly take over the family property. He hadn't expected that Yang Chendong would return, and in such a domineering manner, and even be conferred the title of Valiant Marquis. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable, and Yang Rang had lost a great deal of face. For Yang Chendong's wedding, he had invited all the members of the Yang clan, including all the important ministers in the capital, but his second brother didn't send anything. This had already proved Yang Chendong's attitude. Even so, Yang Rang still came by himself. He knew that this might be an opportunity to change the relationship between himself and his sixth brother. In the main hall, Yang Gong was on the left and Yang Chendong was on the right, accepting the kneeling ceremony of Hu Yanxing, his new daughter-in-law. Under the insistence of Yang Chendong, they only completed the first bow to heaven and earth, and the second bow to the parents. As for the third step of entering the bridal chamber, it was cancelled. According to Yang Chendong, women didn't just stay at home to take care of their husbands and children. They could also do many other things that they liked to do. This was also called the liberation of women. Since it was liberation, then he would start with his wife. After communicating with Hu Yan in advance, and knowing that she didn't want to enter the bridal chamber so early and wait for a long time, he agreed to her request and allowed her to change into a beautiful qipao. Then, she reappeared in front of everyone and toasted the guests with him. When the ceremony reached this point, it was time for the wedding banquet to begin. For the important ministers, the banquet was also a part of their work. There were many things that were difficult to say and difficult to do, but they were often easily done with the passing of a cup. Yang Chendong's wedding gave everyone an opportunity to interact. For a moment, the ministers came and went, and it was very lively. However, this liveliness reached a climax when the bride, Hu Yan, and the three other women changed into decent qipaos and appeared. Yang Chendong announced in front of everyone that today was not only the day he married Hu Yan, but also the day he took Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang as his concubines. After listening to Yang Chendong's announcement, the three women, who were completely unaware before, were so excited that their faces turned red. They originally thought that they were very happy to be able to follow Dong Shui. With their status, they didn't dare to ask for anything. However, they didn't expect that happiness would come to them so quickly and so suddenly. In response, Hu Yan looked at them with a smile. She wasn't surprised at all. Obviously, she already knew about this news and must have agreed. Otherwise, Yang Chendong wouldn't do such a thing in public. He was marrying his wife and concubines on the same day. Although this kind of thing had happened before, most of the protagonists who did it were extremely desolate. However, no matter how one looked at it, Yang Chendong wasn't someone who was muddle-headed. At this point, the general public thought that it was normal for emperors to have many wives and concubines. They also thought that it was natural, and believed that China's ancient people practiced polygamy. However, this wasn't the case. Many modern people learned about ancient China through media such as movies, or web novels. At the same time, they often defined the social environment and culture of that era through the interpretation of the drama. Therefore, when the dramas performed were like the hotly discussed palace dramas such as Zhen Huan Zhuan, Rui Zhuan, Yanxi Strategy, and Do You Know It? The general public would easily take the situation of the emperor and his ministers having many wives and concubines as a matter of course, and believe that the ancient Chinese people practiced polygamy. In fact, what we don't know is that China's marriage model since ancient times was mainly monogamy, and not the stereotypical polygamy and monogamy. The Great Ming Society's Archives number 163 clearly recorded the punishment for those who violated the law. For ordinary people, if they have a wife but still marry her, they will be flogged 90 times and divorced. If they are over 40 years old and have no children, they will be allowed to marry concubines. Violators will be flogged 40 times. However, the rules weren't absolute. Very few people would take concubines. However, those who took concubines were mainly those with high social status. In other words, the higher the status, the more concubines they would take. Therefore, the imperial family naturally had the most concubines, followed by the important officials and the rich. Commoners rarely had the opportunity to take concubines. Therefore, taking concubines was considered a privilege in China's traditional culture. In the Great Ming Society's Archives number 57, it clearly stated that taking concubines, as well as the number of concubines, had to be investigated by the Ministry of Rights. The heir and the prince had 4 concubines. The eldest son and the general had 3 concubines. It was true that Yang Chendong was the marquis of loyalty and courage, so taking in 3 concubines wasn't that much of a violation of the rules. However, why didn't he mention it in advance? Since no one knew about it, didn't that mean that this matter wasn't reported to the Ministry of Rights? Chapter 166. With that in mind, the officials all turned to look at the officials from the Ministry of Rights who had come to attend the banquet. Hu Xiao was the Minister of Rights, and had been for many years at that. At least 1/3 of the officials in the ministry had been promoted by him or had close ties to him. This time, his granddaughter was getting married. Many officials from the Ministry of Rights had come to show their support. When these officials noticed the gazes of their peers, they all lowered their heads. This proved that Yang Chendong hadn't informed the Ministry of Rights about taking concubines. As if he'd known that everyone would react this way, Yang Chendong smiled at them and said, "I didn't inform the Ministry of Rights beforehand, but I did inform the Minister of Rights. I'll make it up to you later. I only did this because I wanted to give the 3 of them a pleasant surprise." As he spoke, Yang Chendong's gentle gaze fell on Xiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang. His gaze was filled with love. Yang Chendong's actions had indeed given the 3 women a pleasant surprise. As for their reactions, they'd all been recorded by Yang Si. When the officials heard that Yang Chendong had told the Minister of Rights that they'd be reported to the Minister of Rights after the banquet, they all came to a sudden realization. Since that was the case, what did they have to worry about? Besides, what did it have to do with them? In reality, Yang Chendong hadn't told Hu Xiao about this. What kind of joke was this? He was marrying someone else's granddaughter, and he was also marrying 3 concubines at the same time. It would be strange if Hu Xiao agreed. However, he dared to say this because he was sure that Hu Xiao wouldn't expose him. Otherwise, if he got into trouble, Hu Yen would also suffer. When the results were announced, it first drew a lot of discussion, but Yang Chendong easily resolved it. After that, he led the 4 women in a toast to the guests. Speaking of which, Hu Yen and the others weren't women who only knew how to stay at home. They'd all seen the world, and with Yang Chendong's guidance, they didn't show any signs of fear. Instead, they generously raised their cups and toasted. The atmosphere was quite harmonious. At the same time, the Immortal Abode's band and actors began to sing and dance outside the Yang clan's courtyard. It was a lively scene. Among the guests, Han Ji also received Yang Chendong's wedding invitation. Out of camaraderie, he was pulled over by Shangguan Lv Gui. At this time, when he saw Yang Chendong with the 4 women, his teeth itched with hatred. "Commander, this Yang Chendong is getting bolder and bolder. He didn't even report taking concubines. He dared to act first and report later. This clearly shows that he doesn't put the laws of the Great Ming Dynasty in his eyes. We cannot allow this to continue." How could Lu Gui not know that Yang Chendong's actions today were a bit out of line? However, he knew that Han Ji's main motive was revenge. It was because his brother-in-law, Wang Go, had been killed by Yang Chendong. That was why he said those words with hatred. But no matter what kind of mentality he had, Han Ji was still one of them. If a superior wanted his subordinates to listen to his orders, he had to empathize with his subordinates. Thus, he nodded and said, "All right, we'll discuss it when we get back. We'll teach him a lesson." "Thank you, Commander, for your help." When Han Ji heard that LV Gue was finally ready to make a move, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He quickly raised his arms and used Yang Chendong's wedding wine to toast LV Gue. The funny thing was that he was also scheming against Yang Chendong. All banquets must come to an end. Although the programs were endless, the guests still left one by one when the sky was almost dark. Among them, there was someone who didn't want to leave. That was the second brother, Yang Rang. At noon, Yang Chendong toasted each table. He had more or less spoken to the guests, but he acted as if he didn't see his second brother. Not only that, even his sisters-in-law treated him like heir. The facts had already shown that Yang Chendong was very angry with him. Since he had come today, he naturally wanted to use this opportunity to perform well and strive to turn hostility into friendship. Second brother, let's go. Today is not suitable for doing other things. The eldest brother, Yang Gong, walked in front of Yang Rang with a face full of alcohol. The behavior of his second brother a while ago, even he was extremely unhappy after seeing it. But after all, they were still brothers. He couldn't just watch Yang Rang be unlucky. Big brother. Seeing Yang Gong walk over, Yang Rang showed an amiable and even fawning smile. Big brother, you must tell little six that I did it for the good of the Yang family manor. In that case, even if I didn't do it, others would do it. At least if I did, I would have given the Yang family a way out, right? Listening to Yang Rang's sophistry, Yang Gong was very disgusted. He could say so many reasons for doing bad things. He was really shameless to the extreme. Okay, let's talk about it later. Let's go first. Yang Gong didn't agree. He just wanted to take his second brother away, so that he wouldn't stay and cause trouble and attract the displeasure of his sixth brother. If that happened, it would really spoil the beautiful atmosphere. His eldest brother did not agree to plead for mercy and just wanted to drag him away. How could Yang Rang be willing to comply? His face immediately changed. All right, since eldest brother doesn't care about our brotherhood and is unwilling to help second brother to plead for mercy, then you can leave by yourself. In short, I will wait here. If little six doesn't come out, I won't go anywhere today. I want to see if he really doesn't recognize me as his elder brother. If this matter spreads out, who will look good at that time? Yang Rang shamelessly shook off Yang Gong's arm and then looked at the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. He looked like he wouldn't leave until he saw the main person. He didn't expect his brother to be such a person. Shamelessness is invincible. At this moment, Yang Gong didn't know what to do. At this moment, a group of people walked out from the inner courtyard. The person in the lead was a woman. It was the eldest sister of the Yang family, Yang Fei. Although they were all from the Yang family, the treatment was obviously different. When Yang Fei walked out, there were 4 brides beside her. Every one of them accompanied her and talked. From time to time, one could see the eldest sister of the Yang family smiling. When he saw his eldest sister walking out, Yang Rang quickly turned around to avoid her. He wasn't afraid of his eldest brother Yang Gong because his eldest brother's ability was mediocre and not worthy of his attention. However, his eldest sister was different. Most of them grew up following behind Yang Fei. When they were young, they were rarely taught a lesson by their eldest sister. As a result, when they grew up, there was still a fear in their hearts. Yang Rang wanted to avoid her, but now that most of the guests had left, there was only a limited number of people left. Yang Fei only needed to sweep her eyes and naturally saw him. When she saw that it was her disappointing second brother who was pacing back and forth, she immediately figured out what was going on. Her face immediately darkened. As the eldest sister, Yang Fei naturally hoped to see the Yang brothers and sisters united. Even if someone did something wrong, if she could give them a chance to forgive, she would be willing to give them the chance. However, as Yang Chendong's second brother, Yang Rang had done something wrong first, and then he wanted to seek justice on the day of the wedding. This was really a bit aggressive. She took large strides and arrived behind Yang Rang, who had just turned around. Yang Gong, who was standing at the side, saw Yang Fei first and quickly called out with a smile, "Eldest sister." When he heard his eldest brother's call, Yang Rang knew that he couldn't avoid it. He could only unwillingly turn around and force out a smile. "Hello, eldest sister. You still recognize me as your eldest sister?" Since that's the case, then leave immediately. Today is my little brother's wedding day. Do you have to stay here and cause trouble? Yang Fei said with a cold face and a rude tone. Eldest sister, that's not what I meant. I just want to talk to little six and explain what happened before. How could Yang Rang admit it? He spoke with a face full of excuses. Hearing Yang Rang call Yang Chendong little six as if he was the boss, Yang Fei was even angrier. She thought about how her little brother had done so many things for the Yang family and even saved Yingzong on the battlefield. That was how dangerous it was to be conferred the title of Marquis. However, there was someone in the family who was dragging her family down. This was truly a chilling action. If she was in Yang Fei's shoes, she would also feel very uncomfortable. With this anger, Yang Fei couldn't be bothered to be polite anymore. She turned to look at Beta Persei and the rest and said, "Go, chase Yang Rang out of the manor. If he doesn't leave, you can beat him until he leaves. I will bear all the consequences. I believe that even if father and mother are watching from the heavens, they won't blame me." Beta Persei had long found Yang Rang an eyesore. This person was lucky to have been born into the Yang family. If it had been anyone else, who knew how many times they would have died by now? After agreeing, Beta Persei strode forward and lifted Beta Persei off the ground with a thick arm. He didn't seem to use any effort to lift him off the ground. The pitiful Beta Persei was dragged out of the manor like a rabbit, then thrown to the ground. If Little Six had ordered someone to do this, he would naturally yell and scream, saying that the other party didn't respect his elder brother. However, since his eldest sister had ordered it, there was nothing he could do. He was the one who had been rude first. Now that he had been thrown out, he was reaping what he sowed. Even though he was still unwilling, Yang Rang had no choice but to stand up with the help of the servants outside the manor. He then entered the palanquin and left the place. In the study of the Yang manor, Yang Chendong was listening to Tiger's Mane's report. The report included the situation in the Immortal abode, as well as the various performances of the officials who had attended the banquet today. The people from the security bureau had disguised themselves as attendants and wandered around the banquet, listening in on everyone's conversations. This was the true record of an official's appearance. At the very least, through this, Yang Chendong could see who had opinions of him and who were dissatisfied with him. "Young master, the embroidered uniform guard just sent someone to deliver this. They said that in order to stabilize the situation in the capital, young master is invited to the embroidered uniform guard's office tomorrow morning to discuss political matters." After Tiger's Mane reported the situation at the banquet, he told Yang Chendong the news he had just received. Chapter 167. Mao, Rabbit. Time was from 5 to 7 o'clock, with 6 o'clock as the time. Letting Yang Chendong go to the meeting so early was obviously not to let the bridegroom have a good night's sleep. It was too obvious that he was deliberately making things difficult for Yang Chendong. In this regard, Yang Chendong just responded with a cold snort, and then ignored it as if he hadn't heard the news. After dealing with the business, Hu Mang tactfully excused himself. Today was the young master's big day, so he had to be tactful to stay far away from the scene. With no one bothering him anymore, Yang Chendong straightened his clothes and walked towards Hu Yan's courtyard in the inner courtyard. Tonight, he was going to perform the Duke of Zhou's rites with her. When he thought of this, his footsteps seemed to quicken. In the bridal chamber, Hu Yan, who had just sent away her elder sister Yang Fei, had returned. After removing her makeup, she changed into a red bridal dress and sat by the bed, waiting. At this time, the room was very quiet, and only the sound of Hu Yan's little heart beating could be heard. Although she had long thought that there would be a day like this, and even looked forward to it. But when she really arrived, she still felt a little nervous. In particular, the servant girl Xiaoqing was nowhere to be found, and no one accompanied her to talk, so the tense atmosphere was even more intense. Creak. The door was pushed open from the outside. Out of instinct, Hu Yan blurted out, "Is it Xiaoqing?" "What? You don't like Lu Lang but Xiaoqing?" With a man's magnetic voice, Yang Chendong, who had changed into a loose red robe, stepped in. Seeing that it was Yang Chendong, Hu Yan's heart beat faster. No. What do you mean by no? Do you like Luleng more or Xiaoqing more? Yang Chendong knew that she was nervous, but he still teased her, which was also a way to relieve her tension. But I like Luleng more. At this time, Hu Yan's voice was very low. If it weren't for Yang Chendong's good hearing, he probably wouldn't have heard what she was saying. After saying this, she had lowered her head. He didn't need to look to know how red her face was right now. After seeing the answer he was satisfied with, Yang Chendong strode forward, picked up Hu Yan, and put her on the bed. At the same time, he waved his sleeve, and all the red candles in the room were extinguished. I like Yen'er too. After a short sentence, a series of rustling sounds could be heard, and then the moon, which was originally hanging in the sky, was now nowhere to be seen. Soon, the entire courtyard was filled with extravagant sounds, 10,000 words omitted. Happy time always passed quickly, and the sky slowly brightened. At the embroidered uniform guard's office, seeing that the time had passed and Yang Chendong still hadn't arrived, Hanji acted as if he had won the lottery. He quickly went to LV Gui, who was sitting there with his eyes closed. Commander, he didn't come. It seems like he doesn't take your words seriously at all. LV Gui didn't even open his eyes after hearing this. No one knew what he was thinking. His eyeballs kept rolling. According to Han Ji's understanding of LV Gui, he was really angry at this time. It seemed that Yang Chendong wouldn't have a good time. That was the truth. LV Gui still didn't open his eyes, but the words he said made Han Ji feel very relieved. Yang Chendong didn't listen to your orders. Suspend his duties first and spread this decision to all the embroidered uniform guards. Suspension for not attending the meeting. This was LV Gui's trap for Yang Chendong. Or it could be said that he had already planned this, so when he said this, he didn't hesitate at all. Han Ji was waiting for this sentence. After he agreed, he turned around and left. He was eager to spread the news and let all the embroidered uniform guards know. In the future, he would like to see how arrogant Marquis would be in the future. The embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had always been the focus of the security bureau. If there was a situation here, it would be sent to the Yang family village and sent to the director Tiger's man. As for when to show it to the young master, it was up to the director to decide whether the situation was serious or not. After tossing and turning for half the night, Hu Yan fell asleep tired. She vaguely felt that someone was moving beside her. In her mind, she suddenly thought that she was no longer the young lady of the Hu family, but the daughter-in-law of the Yang family. She immediately struggled to get up. Well, baby, sleep a little more. A woman must have enough sleep. Also, there are not so many rules here. Yang Chendong's voice came to her ear. Then she felt a heat on her forehead, and their lips came in close contact. After kissing Hu Yan's forehead, Yang Chendong walked out of the bedroom with a face full of energy. After going out, he saw that Xiaoqing had already prepared the water and was waiting to serve Hu Yan. He smiled and said, "Don't disturb Yan, first, let her sleep a little longer. Also, inform the cook, Ichioa, to immediately make a fresh, nutritious breakfast and send it over when the young lady wakes up." Hearing that Yang Chendong was so concerned about her young lady, Xiaoqing's face was full of joy and she quickly agreed. Yang Chendong strode out of the inner courtyard. From afar, he saw Hu Mang waiting for him with a serious expression on his face. Seeing that Hu Mang's brows were almost knitted together, Yang Chendong approached him and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Young master, there's a small matter. The embroidered uniform guards just sent a message saying that you didn't come to the meeting. Lu Gue and the others suspended your position in the embroidered uniform guards." Tiger's man's voice became heavier as he spoke. Obviously, he had a lot of opinions about this matter. Someone dared to make trouble for the young master. With his character, it was best to kill and teach them a good lesson. Suspended? That's fine. Since it's like this young master can have a good rest as a newlywed. Yang Chendong didn't care after hearing this. It was just a position in the embroidered uniform guards. He really didn't care about it. Moreover, something big was about to happen. Lu Gui's actions were just smashing his own foot with a rock. "Let's go for a jog." Not taking this information seriously, Yang Chendong smiled at Tiger's Man and started his morning jog. Tiger's Man was happy that the young master's mood wasn't affected by this. He was worried that the young master would be angered, but now it seemed that he worried too much. The young master's mind was as broad as the sea. The news that the valiant Marquis Yang Chendong's position in the embroidered uniform guards was suspended spread like a gust of wind to the ears of all the officials in the capital. Some of the older officials who believed that they had seen and experienced many things couldn't help but sigh. As expected, an official couldn't be too high profile. Just look at the commotion yesterday. Everyone in the capital knew about it. Wasn't he about to suffer retribution soon? Using this matter, who knew how many people called the younger generation of their families to teach them to endure silently, learn the way of the mean, and not stand out too much? As the main character of this matter, Yang Chendong wasn't as depressed as everyone thought. On the contrary, he was leading the 4 girls, plus 7th sister Yang duo, out of the Yang family manor, heading straight for a place not far away that the common people called Chicken Crow Mountain. Yang Chendong wanted to bring the 5 beauties to the barbecue. For this reason, he had each yoer prepare a lot of ingredients. Tiger's Man, Beta Persei, Chio V's first guard, and 3 squads of Cold Front members accompanied them. Everyone left the manor. It was currently autumn. The maple leaves on the mountain were golden yellow, and the scenery along the way was indescribably beautiful. The 4 girls couldn't stop shouting. Women in ancient times rarely had the opportunity to go out like this. Even if they went out, they were often very strict and weren't allowed to casually look around. How was it like being with Yang Chendong, where they could do whatever they wanted? In the spacious and comfortable carriage, lying down wasn't a problem at all. Every time they saw beautiful scenery, they would take out their only camera to record the beauty. Because of this, the caravan also stopped and traveled. In the afternoon, they finally arrived at the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, which was 30 li away. Soon, everyone set up the grill, held the charcoal, started the fire, prepared the ingredients, and fetched water. The guards also looked around with vigilant eyes. There wasn't the slightest bit of panic, which surprised the 4 girls and made them very happy. The environment in the wilderness was the easiest for people to let their thoughts run wild. Because of this, their mood was also very good. Later on, they even followed a few maids to make skewers out of curiosity. It wasn't enough to just do it themselves, so they even pulled Yang Chendong over. Thus, the dignified marquis of the Great Ming Dynasty actually started working there with the servants. This isn't good. 7th sister Yang duo really couldn't believe the scene in front of her. Her husband, Wang Go, used to be just an insignificant official, but he had always stayed away from the kitchen. The idea of a gentleman staying away from the kitchen was deeply rooted in people's hearts at that time. But look at Yang Chendong. Even though he had the title of marquis and owned such a large family property, he still worked with everyone. From this point alone, the biggest difference between him and the others was that Yang Chendong was different from others. There's nothing bad about it. Since we came out to play and eat, of course, the atmosphere will be better if everyone works together. Hu Yen and Yang duo had the best relationship, and the distance between them was also the closest. Naturally, they heard the whispering just now. But Yang duo still wanted to say something. No buts. Lulang didn't refuse. I think he is willing to do such a thing. As his sister, you don't have to care so much. You should hurry up and work. Don't be outdone by others. Huyen chuckled. After completing the experience of turning from a girl to a woman last night, her mind didn't seem to be as mature as before. At this time, she was completely like a child. If it wasn't for the torment last night and her body didn't allow it, she would probably start jumping around in a while. Chapter 168. Yang duo's doubts were quickly led astray by Hu Yen. In just a short while, not only did she not let her 6th brother Yang Chendong rest, she even took out a portion of the tasks in front of her and placed them in front of him. In her words, it was called, "Capable people do more work." When Yang Chendong was a soldier in his previous life, he did everything very quickly. Naturally, the speed at which he worked was not something these young ladies could compare to. With Yang Duo taking the lead, Hu Yan quickly placed her own skewers in front of Yang Chendong. Not only that, she also brought Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang's skewers over. Xiao Yin and the other two naturally did not dare to mess around like Hu Yan. They could only look at Yang Chendong with an awkward and slightly nervous expression. You guys are too much of a bully. Looking at the mountain of skewers in front of him, Yang Chendong showed a helpless expression, causing the women to laugh out loud. Even Tiger's Mane's wife, Feng, and Yang Xi's wife, Mu Lily, could not help but cover their mouths and chuckle. At that moment, the two women were greeted by their husbands' stern gaze. What the young master did with his wives was considered a pleasure in the boudoir. Outsiders were absolutely not allowed to comment on anything. Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi had been with Yang Chendong for a long time, so they naturally understood this principle. After being glared at, the two women curled their lips and looked as if they were not afraid. However, they turned around and busied themselves with their work. Obviously, they were not afraid of their husband, but they knew that they had to give face at the right time. This way, they could live a happy life. Looking at Yang Chendong, in the face of the work that was completely beyond one person's ability, he waved his hand and called Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Xi over. Put it on. I'll leave this work to the three of you. Young master. Tiger's Mane and the other two looked troubled. If they were asked to charge and break through enemy lines, they would definitely not object. However, when it came to this kind of work, the three of them were really a little embarrassed and unhappy. What is this? The young master asked you to do something, and you're still making excuses? Let me tell you, this job is going to be done by the three of you. You have to finish it. Also, spread the news to Crimson City, let them train a female army. The number doesn't need to be too big, just about 200 people will be enough. In the future, it's better to let them protect Madam. Also, it's better to let them do the delicate work. Yang Chendong sighed. He didn't want a group of men to protect his women. It would be inconvenient. It was better to prepare and train some female soldiers in advance. That's a good idea, a good idea. I've long heard from Xiao Feng that there are many girls in Crimson City who want to become soldiers, but other than entering the propaganda team, there doesn't seem to be a better opportunity. Now that we have a female army, the problem will be solved. Beta Persei laughed foolishly. What problem has been solved? Is it your marriage? Tiger's Mane laughed after hearing this. Among the few of them, Tiger's Mane and Yang Xi's personal problems had been solved. Only Beta Persei had not made any progress in this regard. It was no wonder that Tiger's Mane said this. No. The burly Beta Persei blushed when Tiger's Mane said this. He wanted to argue about something. However, when Yang Chendong saw this, he smiled and said, Tiger's Mane is right. Beta Persei, you're already 20 years old. It's time for you to find a wife. Work is important, marriage is also important, and carrying on the family line is even more important. Since Yang Chendong said this, Beta Persei could not refute. He could only lower his head and agree. However, anyone could see that he was really uncomfortable holding it in. He wanted to find a chance to learn from Tiger's Mane. They skewered the meat and started to roast it. The sky gradually darkened. Fortunately, Lung Feng had already prepared dry wood. He set them together and lit them up. As a result, a huge bonfire was formed. When the bonfire was lit, the flames burned fiercely. A sense of warmth instantly spread throughout everyone's body. Bonfire, the fragrance of meat, good wine, beautiful women. When all of this was put together, it formed a very beautiful picture. Very soon, other than Lung Feng, who was on sentry duty and in charge of safety, everyone else, including Yang Chendong and his 4 wives, left the scene and gathered around the bonfire to dance and sing. Everyone's cheeks were red and all of them were beaming with joy. Hu Yan's left hand was held by Yang Chendong, and on her right was Yang Duo. Her hands were raised from time to time, and her legs were kicking and jumping. Her face was like a peach blossom, and she was extremely happy. This kind of life was something she had never dared to imagine before. It was so unrestrained, free, and even freewheeling. And it seemed that her future life could be accompanied by this. How could it not make people yearn for it and feel relaxed and happy? They did not know how long they had been dancing and singing. They drank a lot of wine, and under Dong Shuai's intentional or unintentional actions, Hu Yan was a little drunk. It was already very late. When everyone was tired, Hu Yan felt her body being lifted into the air. She was carried onto Yang Chendong's back and they entered a spacious and sturdy tent that had already been set up. Hu Yan knew that beautiful things like last night would happen again. Just when she was feeling shy, Yang Chendong had gone out and walked in again. This time, he was holding Xiao Yin in his arms. The sudden appearance of another woman made Hu Yan feel a burst of shyness and surprise. The joy of a boudoir was certainly something that people yearned for, but why did he bring another person out? Before Hu Yan could figure it out, Lady Shui and Lady Xiang were also carried into the tent by Yang Chendong. The other 3 women had already seen this kind of thing. They slept together, so of course, they knew what Dong Shui was going to do. They were a little shy and a little excited. Hu Yan, on the other hand, was completely unaware. Just when she was wondering why there were so many people all of a sudden, a big hand began to wander around her body. That feeling made her feel comfortable and shy. She forced herself to stay awake and said, "Lu Lang, don't do this. There are others, not others. They are all your sisters. Let's do it together." Yang Chendong said very soberly. Under his skillful methods, Hu Yan was quickly turned into a pile of mud. Then she was completely at his mercy. In her consciousness, she seemed to see a few white bodies. Then she fainted happily. For a moment, the garden was filled with intoxicating spring. A ray of sunlight slowly shone through the tent and shone on Hu Yan's face. She felt the warmth and slowly opened her eyes. What came into view was that Xiao Yin and the other women were still sleeping. She could not help but exclaim. Her mind instantly recalled some of the things that happened last night. Since she was young, she had never been taught such words and thoughts in her education. For a moment, she could not believe that something like this would happen to her. Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang had already woken up. After all, it was not the first time they had done this. Their physical recovery was naturally much better than Hu Yan's. It was only because they did not know how to face it that they pretended to be asleep. However, after this scream, they could no longer pretend. They opened their eyes one by one and saw Hu Yan's tears flowing down the corners of her eyes. Hu Yan's crying made the other 3 women panic. They quickly came forward to comfort her and took the blame, saying that it was all their fault. "No, you are not wrong. It's all his fault. I can't accept this." Hu Yan didn't want to be estranged from her sisters as soon as she came here. Although she was the official wife, she had never thought about how to rely on such an identity to bully others. "Please don't blame Sir. I'm sure Big Sister doesn't know that Sir is especially good in that aspect. None of us can satisfy him." Xiao Yin hated it when people talked bad about Yang Chendong. Even if the person who spoke was Hu Yan, she was still unhappy. Yes, second sister is right. Sir is indeed very good in that aspect. It's not something we can handle alone. Lady Shui hurriedly said to Xiao Yin. "Sir is working hard outside for our happiness. There are many things he needs to consider. We are just serving him. If we can't satisfy him in this aspect, then aren't we too useless?" Among the women, Lady Xiang, who became Yang Chendong's woman one step ahead of Hu Yan, also expressed her attitude. They did not know when it started, or maybe it was yesterday, but they had automatically made a list. Hu Yan was Yang Chendong's first wife, so she was naturally the eldest sister. Xiao Yin had been with Yang Chendong the longest, so she was naturally the second sister. Lady Shui was the third sister, and Lady Xiang was the fourth sister. As for whether there would be a fifth sister after that, it was already set in stone. Xiao Yin had said that there was a girl named Luan Xiaoyu in their hometown who also liked Yang Chendong very much. Yang Chendong also liked her, but because she was too young, they still had to wait. If there was a fifth sister, then who knew if there would be a sixth sister and a seventh sister? However, seeing that Yang Chendong was so young and had such a big family business, it was not surprising that there would be sisters joining him. Hu Yen didn't expect that she would immediately be met with the common resistance of her 3 younger sisters when she said Yang Chendong's fault in a fit of pique. She quickly changed her words and said, "I don't mean to blame him. It's because things came too suddenly and I can't accept it, so it's normal that you can't accept it. I don't blame Big Sister for having such thoughts. However, from now on, we sisters will not forgive anyone who says anything bad about Sir. Especially Big Sister. You must set an example for us." Xiao Yin said this with a rare serious expression. In her heart, Yang Chendong was the sky, the earth, and her everything. Chapter 169. Oh, I got it. Hu Yen, who had clearly suffered a loss, was now like a child who had done something wrong. She lowered her head and pursed her lips. However, it had to be said that after such a conversation, she had diluted the matter of sleeping together. She, who had been persuaded, had also begun to consider Yang Chendong. At the foot of Chicken Crow Mountain, Yang Chendong had just returned from his morning run when he was stopped by 7th sister, Yang Duo. "What's the matter, 7th sister? Did someone bully you?" Yang Chendong pretended to be angry when he saw the anger in Yang Duo's eyes. Her eyes weren't eyes, and her nose wasn't nose. But in reality, he knew very well what 7th sister was here for and what she wanted to say. "6th brother, aren't you going too far? I heard that last night you... What happened last night? Did 7th sister not rest well? If so, go back and have a good rest now. If you want to go back to the Yang family village, I can send someone to send you back now. As for other things, let's not talk about them." Yang Chendong saw that the other party was bluntly talking about what happened last night and seemed to want to interfere in his family matters. Yang Chendong used words to block her. In the end, he still had to rely on himself to live his own life. As for other people's opinions, it was just a one-sided opinion and did not represent anything. Perhaps Yang Chendong was very easy to talk to when it did not involve matters of principle. However, when it came to some matters, his words carried enormous weight. Once he made a decision, he would not change it. Yang Chendong's tone suddenly became a little stiff. Yang Duo could not accept it for a moment. "6th brother, you've changed?" "It's not that I've changed. It's just that 7th sister has never seriously understood me." Yang Chendong shook his head and looked at Yang Duo very seriously. They were family and had a blood relationship, so he would not watch anyone bully his 7th sister. However, this was not a reason for the other party to interfere in his life. With just one sentence, Yang Duo suddenly became speechless. Yes, she really did not understand Yang Chendong. Ever since her youngest brother had appeared in the capital, she had always been surprised by his appearance. Some matters seemed reckless, but they ended with a cause and effect. Some matters seemed unsolvable, but as long as 6th brother made a move, he would always be able to grasp the crux of the matter and solve it in one step. As a woman, she was only judging from her own point of view. But was her point of view really correct? Even Hu Yen, as the mistress of the house, did not express any doubts. What reason and authority did he have to say anything? "I'm sorry, 6th brother. I'm thinking too much. I think I should go back to the tent and have a good rest." Yang Duo suddenly felt that her behavior was a bit reckless. For a moment, she wanted to find a quiet place to think about it. After saying this, Yang Duo turned around and left. This time, Yang Chendong didn't stop him. He knew that there were some things that he had to figure out himself. 7th sister, who had already experienced a failed marriage, was most afraid of being hurt in this aspect. Speaking of which, she reminded her out of kindness. However, Yang Duo forgot one thing. Yang Chendong was not Wang Go. After Yang Duo left, Yang Chendong strode back into the tent. After what had happened to 7th sister, he was even prepared to be scolded by Hu Yen. This was his woman and he should love her. No matter what Hu Yen said, he was prepared to not talk back. When he entered the tent, Xiao Yin and the other 2 girls had already left. Only the maid Xiaoqing was there to dress Hu Yen. When she saw Yang Chendong enter, Xiaoqing quickly bowed and said, "Master. And how about this? You can leave for a moment. I have something to discuss with Madam." Yang Chendong smiled and nodded to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing naturally knew that she would spend the rest of her life with Hu Yan and Yang Chendong. How could she dare to refuse such a small request? She agreed and immediately left. When only the two of them were left in the tent, Hu Yan lowered her head with a blush. Hu Yan was shy. After all, she and her 3 sisters served Yang Chendong last night. It was a shameful thing. She couldn't adapt for a while and couldn't face it. However, when Yang Chendong saw the scene, he thought that she was angry at him. He hurriedly squatted down and said, "Yan, it's my fault. I didn't consider your feelings. I was too agitated, so, no." His mouth was suddenly blocked by Hu Yan's small hand. "Ling, don't say that. As your wife, I didn't consider your feelings. Last night, I was willing." The more she spoke, the lower her head. In the end, her head was about to plunge into Yang Chendong's arms. He didn't expect such a result. For a moment, Yang Chendong was overjoyed. "Really? Yan, you're the best. I love you so much." In ancient times, the word love was not so easily spoken. Even when husband and wife spoke words of love, they rarely used the word love. However, when Yang Chendong said the word love, Hu Yan was overjoyed. She felt that she had made the right decision by listening to Qiao Yin and the others. In her happiness, she said happily, "Luleng, I didn't understand you before. You were too tired. As your wife, as long as you're happy, you can do whatever you want in the future." Yang Chendong had already thought it through. It must be Qiao Yin and the others who did Hu Yan's work that resulted in such a delicious result. He was instantly even more satisfied with Qiao Yin and the others. Originally, he had to spend a lot of effort to persuade them. Unexpectedly, he didn't need to say anything and the matter was resolved. In his happiness, Yang Chendong held Hu Yan's little face and kissed it. With this kiss, Hu Yan felt her entire body go soft. She said shyly and carefully, "Husband, if you want to, can you wait until night time? After all, it's broad daylight. If others find out, I'm afraid it won't be good." Seeing that Hu Yan seemed to be a little moved, Yang Chendong laughed. However, he also knew that Hu Yan's skin was probably very thin. At least, it wasn't as thick as his. If he didn't let go of this matter, it was very likely that it would cause resentment. Therefore, he intentionally changed the topic. First, he talked about the matter between Xiaoqing and Sun Chuang. They're not young anymore. As their master, you should find a time to arrange their marriage. We'll take care of all the expenses. In short, you can't treat Xiaoqing unfairly. After all, she's been with you for so many years, hasn't she? Thank you, 6th young master. Seeing that Yang Chendong had considered the matter so carefully, Hu Yan was very moved and said, "We're husbands. In the future, there's no need to say thanks. Everything I do for you is what I should do. By the way, my 7th sister seems to have some complaints about what happened last night. Do you think you should personally go and have a good talk with her? I don't want her to misunderstand me, hee." Yang Chendong thought about it and decided to leave the job of persuading 7th sister to Hu Yan. If Hu Yan took the initiative to persuade her, it would be more effective than 100 words from him. Hearing that 7th sister had complaints, Hu Yan's heart was moved. This was 7th sister standing up for her. She didn't even hesitate to blame her own brother. This sister-in-law was absolutely competent. Hu Yan agreed, and Yang Chendong's heart was completely relieved. Although there were some things that he didn't ask others to understand, they were still family, and understanding was always better than opposing. Just as Yang Chendong was enjoying the happiness of having multiple wives and gaining the understanding of his wife, several groups of fast horses were galloping through the streets of the capital. These brave soldiers had banners with the word Exing written on their backs. As soon as they entered the capital, their faces were gloomy as they spurred their horses forward. Many scheming people had a bad premonition when the messenger didn't shout the news of victory from 600 miles away. This should be a battle report from the front line. If it wasn't a victory report, what could it be? At this time, in the imperial court, Zhu Qiyu had already changed into a dragon robe and was sitting on a huge golden dragon throne. He was looking at the officials and listening to them report on the important matters of the court. Zhu Qiyu, who had been emperor for some time, had gradually come to like this feeling of being high and mighty. Although he didn't have complete power and had the final say, he had basically controlled the situation. Out of the 6 ministries, 2 of the ministers had been replaced by his favored candidates, Minister of Revenue Jin Lian and Minister of War Yi Ming. These 2 had replaced Wang Zuo and Kuang Yi, who had followed Emperor Ying to Nanjing. These 2 new ministers were very grateful to Zhu Qiyu for his favor. Naturally, if this substitute emperor had any requests, they would do their best to satisfy them. Of the 6 ministries, the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, had always been a fence-sitter. When Wang Zhen had been present, he had often tried to curry favor with him. Now that Jin Ning had become a head eunuch, he had long since leaned over. In this way, he could also be considered a member of the substitute emperor's faction. Out of the 6 divisions, 3 of them were on her side. Zhu Qiyu felt even more satisfied. Zhu Qiyu had come to court in a happy mood, intending to show off his skills and compete with Zhu Qizhen in governing the country. However, all of this ambition was shattered when a messenger ran into the imperial court to deliver an urgent military report. Report, important military intelligence from the front line. As soon as the messenger entered the main hall, he knelt on the ground with a thud. It could be seen that he had been running non-stop all this time, so much so that he was a little exhausted. Speak. Hearing that it was a military report from the front line, Zhu Qiyu straightened his body and looked at the soldier with a face full of expectation. Your Majesty, Admiral Shi Heng was ambushed by Walla's army. The army suffered heavy losses, but Admiral broke out of the encirclement and is resisting the enemy cavalry's advance. Please let me report this to Your Majesty first and ask for reinforcements to be sent. Prepare for a big battle. After the messenger finished speaking in one breath, he felt his vision blur and then fainted from exhaustion. Chapter 170. Quickly, carry him away and treat him. Jin Ning stood at Zhu Qiyu's side, looking at the unconscious soldiers as she spoke to the human soldiers outside the imperial court. After saying this, she felt a shadow flicker at her side. Who else could it be but Daizong? Just as Zhu Qiyu was about to show off his skills and become a famous monarch to unify the world, he suddenly heard that the front line had been defeated. At this moment, how could he still remain calm? His expression changed greatly, so much so that his body became a little shaky. Dear ministers, how many troops can we mobilize now? Zhu Qiyu forced himself to stay alert upon hearing this report, and he turned his eyes to the new Minister of War, Yi Ming, hoping that he could give a satisfactory result. Yi Ming, courtesy name Zixin, was the son of Yizhi, a man of high intelligence. After ascending the throne, Daizong had sought the favor of the Minister of Rights and was promoted to Minister of War. He was an official who had been promoted on the front lines. When he first arrived at the Bureau of Military Personnel, his seniority was still shallow, so he did not have complete control over the Bureau of Military Personnel. Now that a problem had arisen, Yi Ming felt his head ache. But Yi Ming was still a capable person, and he quickly calmed down. After some thought, he went to the Bureau of Military Personnel and looked at the reports from the various factions and calculated a result. Your Majesty, there are currently only 5,000 soldiers in the capital. If we continue to urgently mobilize them, we should be able to mobilize another 5,000 soldiers in 3 days. In half a month, we should be able to gather an army of 50,000 soldiers. For the mighty capital of the Great Ming Dynasty to have so few soldiers was a result that Zhu Qiyu had not expected. But he knew that since Yi Ming dared to say this, there was no doubt about this result. If this was really the case, how should they deal with the arrival of the Walla's army? Speaking of which, there were many reasons for the current situation in the capital. Unlike in history, after the Tuma Fortress incident, Daizong had listened to Yu Qian's words and adopted a defensive strategy. This had led to the defense of the capital and the defeat of the Walla's army. Because of Yang Chendong's arrival, Yu Qian had been invited to Tsuxian City long ago to serve him. With the idea gone, Shi Heng took command of the army and sent out the majority of the soldiers in and around the capital. Moreover, Zhu Qizhen had declared himself emperor in Nanjing and taken away a portion of his soldiers, leaving the capital suddenly empty of soldiers. Naturally, they were helpless against Walla's army. At this moment, not only Zhu Qiyu, but the other officials were also staring at each other, unable to find a better idea. As the saying goes, even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. Without sufficient military strength, how can one fight a war? Can one rely on words? If they could win with their mouths, there would be no need for the country to support a large number of troops. Among the ministers, Su Youzhen's eyes kept darting around. Relying on his relationship with Yang Qindong, he was promoted again. He was no longer a part of the imperial censor, but went to Taichung Temple to become a Shaoqing. He was in charge of the country's sacrificial ceremonies and was a fourth-grade official. The reason why he was promoted so quickly was naturally because Yang Qindong had helped him with a lot of money. It was also because the original Shaoqing of Taichung Temple, Huang Yangjing, went to Nanjing with Ing Zong, so there was a vacancy. As a fourth-grade official, Su Youzhen already had a stage to display his ambitions. At this moment, when he saw the emperor and the other ministers' difficult expressions, he really wanted to stand up and propose to move the capital to the south. After all, a gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. In fact, in history, Su Youzhen was the main official who proposed this idea. But now, this idea just flashed in his mind. It was not for anything else, but because Ing Zong had already gone to Nanjing. At this time, what would they mean by going there? It was likely that an internal conflict would be inevitable. And Zhu Qiyu, who was leading the defeated army, really did not know what the chances of winning were. Unable to bring up the matter of moving the capital to the south, Su Youzhen's eyes darted around as he thought of another feasible idea. At this moment, when the other ministers were still thinking about what to do, he had already taken out his ceremonial tablet. He stepped forward and said, "I have something to report." "Minister Su, quickly say it." Seeing that everyone had no idea, but one minister still had a suggestion, Zhu Qiyu suddenly had a feeling of hope. "Your Majesty, the army at the front has suddenly lost, and the capital is in danger. At this time, the first thing to do is to mobilize the troops near the capital to save the emperor. The second thing to do is to choose a general who can lead the army to block the enemy outside the city wall. This will ensure the stability of the great Ming dynasty. That's right, mobilizing the troops after, choosing the general before." Zhu Qiyu felt that it was very reasonable. He immediately said to the Minister of War, Yi Ming, "Minister Yi, you can send a letter to mobilize the troops near the capital to protect the capital." "Yes, Your Majesty," Yi Ming replied and then left the court with his ceremonial tablet. "Good, now everyone, who can lead the army to fight against the Walla army?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes swept across the ministers in the court. The desire in his eyes was very obvious. However, when he asked this question, the entire court fell silent. First, the Tumilfort's army of 500,000 suffered a crushing defeat, and then General Shi Heng's army of 150,000 was also defeated. Right now, there were only a few thousand men left in the imperial court. Even if they waited for 3 days, their military strength would still be no more than 10,000. How could they resist the elite Walla cavalry? The Walla cavalry could defeat the great Ming army again and again. At this moment, the ministers' faces changed at the mention of this tiger. The crowd of officials didn't speak. This made Zhu Qiyu extremely anxious. What's wrong? Our magnificent great Ming dynasty actually has a great general who can command the 3 armies? Valuing the civil and despising the military had always been the basic national policy of the Ming dynasty. In fact, it was not only the Ming dynasty. It was the same from the earliest Han dynasty to the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty. After all, the military was strong and the civil was weak, which was not good for the stability of the country. In the Ming dynasty, this situation was even more obvious. Normally, when the military met the civil officials, it was very rare for the military to be able to straighten their backs. It was just like Xixing in the past. However, a Qianhu of the Brocade Guard could bully a famous general, Zhang Fu, and invade his land. It was no wonder that when Zhu Qiyu asked this question, the civil officials and the military officials did not speak. Is there really no brave general who dares to face the Walla army? Zhu Qiu asked loudly in anger. At this moment he really wanted to roar, "If none of you go, do you want us to personally lead the army?" However, when he thought of his elder brother Zhu Qizhen's end, this thought quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not want to be the second emperor who lost an army. What if he was captured by the enemy when the time came? What should he do? Zhu Qiu's face was full of anger. He criticized the officials that he usually raised for being useless. Jin Ying saw that the situation in the court had worsened and reminded him in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this matter needs to be discussed at length. It is better to dismiss the court first and wait until tomorrow morning to make a decision." The courtiers were not completely loyal to him. The most important thing was that there was still Zhu Qizhen in Nanjing for everyone to rely on. Even if he really got angry here, not only would it be useless, it was likely to lead to a backlash from the courtiers. If they collectively left, then his position as the emperor would come to an end. Forget it, forget it. Everyone, go back and think about it carefully. Wait until tomorrow morning. No matter what, you must choose a candidate. Dismiss the court. Zhu Qiu was very helpless. Although he had become the emperor, this emperor did not seem to be as powerful as the previous Ming dynasty emperors. After the officials shouted "Long live the emperor," they left the court and left the palace. After Su Yozhen left the palace hall, she quickly contacted the people of the security bureau and reported the situation in the court today. At this time, Yang Chendong had already returned to the Yang family manor from the foot of Jiming Mountain with the women. Originally, the women wanted to play for a few more days, but tomorrow was the time for Hu Yen to return home. This was an important matter for the first madam, so Yang Chendong naturally had to take care of it. He returned to the Yang family manor in advance to make preparations. On the way back, the people of the security bureau came over and reported everything that happened in the court. The group had stopped. Yang Chendong stood on the side of the road and listened to the report of the staff of the security bureau. In the carriage, Qiao Yin looked at this scene through the curtain and couldn't help but say, "Sir is busy with important matters again. Unfortunately, we can't help much. The only thing we can do is to make him happy when he sees us. Don't make him angry and satisfy all his requests." "You're right, second sister." Lady Shui and Lady Xiang hurriedly agreed. Looking at Hu Yen, although she didn't say anything at this time, from her concerned eyes, it could be seen that she had accepted the fact that she slept with him. Even if the other women could understand Yang Chendong as the wife, why couldn't she understand? On the side of the road, after carefully listening to what happened in the court, Yang Chendong sighed. Although the wheel of history had changed because of his appearance, the defense of the capital still had to start as scheduled. Since history had changed, Yang Chendong couldn't accurately predict what would happen, and naturally couldn't make plans in advance. But since the emperor asked to recommend a general to lead the army, he was somewhat interested. First, this was a good opportunity for him to show his talent. Second, it was a good opportunity to consolidate his strength and expand his influence. Third, and most importantly, Yang Chendong would never allow the other races to have any ideas about the Han people and cause any destruction. Back then, Kuang Yi and Wang Zhuo, the two ministers of the 6 ministries, wrote to him, saying that he had saved Ingzong's life and that he would have more room to develop in Nanjing than in the capital. The environment would also be better. But Yang Chendong still refused. That was because there was a strong enemy in the capital, Walla, while Nanjing was very safe. Chapter 171. It couldn't be said that Yang Chendong had appeared for the sake of war, but he had indeed appeared for the sake of the Han's rise to power. Since there were people who wanted to harm the Han, why couldn't he teach them a lesson? Presumably, after this battle, Zhu Qiu would owe him a big favor. This would only be beneficial to his future plans. Alright, Marquis knows about this matter. How about this? Go back and tell Su Yozhen to recommend Marquis to lead the army tomorrow morning. Yang Chendong analyzed the situation and felt that the time was right. It was time to step forward, so he informed his subordinates of his decision. Yes. The staff member of the Security Bureau quickly left after receiving a confirmation. Yang Chendong quickly returned to the spacious carriage. As soon as he entered, the women began to chatter incessantly. Knowing that there were some things that couldn't be hidden, Yang Chendong maintained a smile on his face as he said, "The soldiers on the front lines have been defeated. The Walla army should be arriving at the capital soon." The women had only asked out of curiosity. Even if Yang Chendong hadn't said anything, they would have understood. After all, the idea of a male protagonist had been passed down for thousands of years. But unexpectedly, Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of hiding it from them. He really did tell them about it, but the result was so shocking. They're about to reach the capital? As a descendant of the Hu clan, Hu Yen was naturally more sensitive to political matters than the other women. "You don't need to worry. With sixth brother here, no one in this world can harm you. You just need to properly stay in the Yang clan manner." Yang Chendong spoke with an incomparably resolute voice. At this moment, Yang Chendong was so confident that the four women were mesmerized and unable to extricate themselves. Sensing that the four women weren't panicking anymore, Yang Chendong smiled and said, "All right, let's do what we need to do now. The immortal abode and realm beyond heaven need to operate normally to calm the people. If possible, if there's a property market nearby that's willing to sell at a suitable price, we can buy it. It's also time to expand our operations." To ordinary people, war was naturally a disaster. But to some people it was filled with countless business opportunities. Everything depended on your position, what kind of information you could obtain, and what kind of authority you held. Yang Chendong didn't lack any of these three things. If he couldn't maximize his benefits in this situation, then all his previous preparations and plans would be meaningless. Bye. This was the first order Yang Chendong gave to Hu Yen and the others, as well as the first mission of his wives. For the sake of making the best of the situation, a total of 5 million taels of silver had been moved out of the cellar of the Yang clan manor. This was all prepared by Yang Chendong before the construction of the Uthwood fortress. It was all for the sake of dealing with the current situation. Tell Leng Song to pick up the pace. Be more daring. We have to reach the capital within 5 days. Yang Chendong looked at Leng Feng and his brothers, who were carrying so much silver that their hands were about to go limp. Even though he was giving orders to Tiger's Mane, he was thinking of another problem. If moving silver was so troublesome, it seemed like it was time to consider the issue of banknotes. The appearance of banknotes was a huge step forward in the history of currency. Some people in the world of currency believed that the origin of banknotes in China could be traced back to the white deer skin coin of Emperor Wu's time and the flying money of the Tang dynasty. The flying money was actually just a currency exchange business. It did not enter into circulation and did not function as a currency, so it was not a true banknote. The banknotes of Sichuan and Qingdu during the Northern Song dynasty were the beginning of the true banknotes. But for various reasons, the system was not perfect, and in the end, it was not developed on a large scale. In the Yuan dynasty and Ming dynasty, although the banknote system was further improved, it was still difficult for it to be accepted by the people. At the end of the Qing dynasty, the Qing dynasty's economy was in trouble and the treasury was empty. In order to raise money for the military, they had to change their original plan of not printing banknotes for 200 years. In the third year of Xianfeng, 1853, the first banknote of the Ministry of Revenue was printed. This time, the banknotes of the Ministry of Revenue were divided into 5 types of silver: 1 tael, 3 taels, 5 taels, 10 taels, and 50 taels. In the middle of the banknotes were written in both Manchu and Chinese characters, Ministry of Revenue Official Banknote. It was from then on that banknotes became one of the paper currencies that could be circulated. Although the Ming dynasty also had official banknotes, most of them were internal transactions between officials. Ordinary people and even merchants rarely participated in them. The imperfection of the system meant that these banknotes could be turned into waste paper at any time. Who would dare to use silver to exchange for them? Not to mention other people, but even Yang Chendong himself did not trust the Ming dynasty government. This government was made up of officials, and the speed at which it changed was so fast that it made one's eyes blur. Who would dare to take out all of their wealth to exchange for banknotes? Perhaps the moment one exchanged for it, the Jin Yi guards and the East faction guards would come to raid one's home. For example, Yang Chendong's 5 million taels of silver had never been exposed. He believed that if he really trusted the great Ming dynasty, Wang Zhen would have already made a move on him and would not have waited until it had developed to such a scale. It was because the banknote system was not recognized by many that Yang Chendong wanted to do something about it. In his later life, he had seen the power of the state-owned banks, so he could naturally see the huge benefits involved. As for the risks, with the Yang Xie's new army as his backing, he was not afraid of others plotting against him. Perhaps he was still thinking that if others had such thoughts, he would have a good reason to deal with them. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about his grand plans, the capital was already in chaos. As the officials returned home from the court, the news of the Ming dynasty's defeat spread like wildfire. For a time, all sorts of things were said, and in a state of panic, a small number of people left the capital and headed south. Although there were not many of them, most of them were merchants. They had all left in fear after hearing that the Ming dynasty's army was defeated and that the Walla was about to arrive at the capital. When these people left, most of them took with them a large amount of cash from their homes. Perhaps it was said that merchants valued profits, and patriotism was not as reliable as profits. The departure of a portion of merchants caused the already tense atmosphere in the capital to become even more chaotic. Even some of the common people began to pack up. After 2 consecutive defeats and the loss of the Ming dynasty's elites, they did not have much confidence that they could defeat the Walla. If they did not leave, they would most likely meet with misfortune. Not to mention, in the afternoon of that day, there was a rumor that the Vala cavalry drank human blood and ate human flesh to survive. Once captured, the women would naturally be humiliated, and the men and children would become food in their mouths. This news was far more effective than people saying that the Walla cavalry was brave and good in battle. The direct result was that a large number of people gathered at the city gate. If it was not for the city gate being closed at the time, who knew how many people would have left? The so-called news of the Walla eating humans was naturally released by the Security Bureau in order to attract big hoodlums and fish in troubled waters. However, this action seemed to be a little too big. At that time, the common people were not well informed and their knowledge was limited. Thus, they really believed the rumors, and in a short period of time, a wave of people left the city. The situation at the city gate quickly spread to the palace and into the ears of the acting patriarch, Zhu Qiu. When he heard that his people were so panicked, the new emperor was scared out of his wits. If the capital became an empty city, how could it resist the Walla army? Could it be that he, the new emperor, was going to abandon the city and flee? If that was the case, where could he go? Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect was probably waiting for him to make a fool of himself. Go and find out who spread the rumors. After we catch them, we will cut them into pieces. Zhu Qiu's eyes seemed to spit fire as he spoke. Your Majesty, the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern Depot will naturally investigate this matter. However, what is more important is how to pacify the people in the city. If these people really do leave the capital, then Jin Ying, who had been urgently summoned, did not elaborate on what would happen. But one could imagine that if the capital became empty, the emperor would truly be a loner. In that case, this emperor would have undoubtedly failed. We can't let them leave. Beloved subject, do you have a good plan? Zhu Qiu naturally understood the severity of the situation if things continued to develop like this, so he urgently asked Jin Ying if he had any good ideas. Your Majesty, this subject is incompetent and does not have a better plan for now. However, in order to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control, this subject suggests that we temporarily close the city gates and allow only small towns to enter and exit. Moreover, we must conduct inspections and forbid the common people from taking money out of the city. In this way, the family property will naturally remain here and will not leave. As for how to deal with the Walla soldiers, Your Majesty must preside over tomorrow's morning court and discuss with the other officials a plan. Jining had never seen anything like this before. Although he had followed several emperors and seen their ability to govern, This was mostly a power struggle between the emperor and the court officials. This was the first time he had ever seen an army pressing down on the capital. Zhu Qiu was somewhat panicked, but he felt that Jin Ying's words were somewhat reasonable. He immediately agreed and placed all his hopes on tomorrow's morning court. After a sleepless night, the morning court began as scheduled. At the same time, the main gates of the capital were opened to side gates in the name of preventing Walla spies from sneaking in. Strict inspections were also carried out, and if anyone was found to be leaving the capital with large amounts of money, they would be arrested on the spot for all sorts of unnecessary crimes. Although this method was somewhat forceful, it truly did prevent the common people from leaving the capital. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.